Good morning, everyone. Miss, I think that's Izzy. Is that Izzy? Yeah, Miss Izzy says hello too. Let me know if you guys can hear me fine. Still haven't gotten a new cord for my microphone yet, so I'm still using. I keep seeing it says it's the webcam microphone, but I don't think the webcam has a microphone, so I'm not sure. I thought I was using my computer microphone, but whatever. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I did not even I didn't get a message or a notification this morning, neither, Les Bones. Oh, I see one now. Okay, so it happened at 11:02, so like 2 minutes into it is when I got the notification, which is weird because I set up the live stream last night. So I mean, it should have already been in like, if you're subscribed, it'll be like in your subscription section. So I don't know what's going on. YouTube hates us. You know how it goes. Hi everyone. I've got Yona in here. Let me bring in the talented Yona. What is up, brother? How are you?
Woo! Testing, testing. Smoke more weeds. Can you hear me?
That's right. That's
All
right.
right.
Smoke more weed. That's right. I'm like on a mixture of like, what is this? It's Excedrin migraine with caffeine in it and weed right now. So I'm kind of like on a battle in my head. Like, all right, I'm awake. No, I want to go to sleep. I'm awake. No, I want to go to sleep.
Well, not all weeds are the same. Some put you in the couch, and some get you full of pizzazz.
Right, right.
Shows up.
I'm trying to find the good weeds that get me full of pizzazz, but it's so hard because most of them are sativa, and my husband gets a heartburn when he smokes sativa, so I'm like always smoking indica all the time. It never fails. I'm like, I'm tired of having to get up off the couch and fighting it. Can I please have something that just makes me awake?
Yeah, I got to
Oh
say,
my
right now I'm in this whole citrus zone with mandarin and orange and lemon and lime and
God.
just you really, I mean, two things you can't go wrong in life with. That's bacon and fruit.
Right.
Maybe bacon wrapped fruit. Oh, there's an idea.
That
This wasn't
sounds
supposed
fucking
to be a
delicious.
cooking show today. I swear to God.
That sounds so good though.
Ooh, imagine
Bacon
fried
wrapped
bacon wrapped
strawberries.
around
That's exactly what.
strawberries with
Yeah.
whipped cream.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a
Why not?
little bit
And
of
then dip
like
it all in
some maple.
chocolate. Fuck
Yeah,
it.
or
Fuck
some
it.
maple syrup for our Canadians. You know. Oh,
Yona's Munchies recipes. All
yeah.
right.
Right. Right. Right. Les Bones. Don't let Shake and Bacon hear this. Oh, that's great. So how
That's
have you
the
been?
best thing of all. If you could like powder up your bacon, like where you grind it and it's all like powdery, put it down in a bag, and like
Ooh.
instead of using like your shake and bake mix, you could put your fruit down in it and dust your fruit with
All right.
powdered bacon.
I'm gonna try that because I have one of those like little mini grinders that just it's your
Yeah,
cup and you put it upside down and
yeah,
grind
yeah.
it. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna cook up some bacon today, have my husband bring home some strawberries, and I'm gonna try that out because that sounds
I'll
fucking
tell you the
good.
thing to do. You know how they got that fruit dip? Like you dip all your fruit in, like in the middle bowl there. It's like
Mm-hmm.
got a cream cheese or something in it.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if you put the bacon and mix it into the fruit dip. Bacon
Ooh.
fruit dip. Boom!
All right, we're gonna have to discuss this more because this is almost sounding like Shark Tank stuff. Like we can become millionaires off of Shark Tank with this. I'm thinking. Uh, that's great. So,
There's something else I highly recommend while we're on the subject of food, and that's called ganache or
mm,
kanachi, or I mean,
hmm
we call it ganache. It's a one of the oldest Cherokee foods
hmm
that's known to all Cherokee and pretty much known to all of mankind. I mean, it's basically a soup made from hickory nuts. And so, like, you get like shell bark hickory nuts, and it's kind of hard to get all the hard parts out and just the white nut meat, I guess, out
right.
of the hickory shell. And so, oftentimes, we just pound it. We have like a stump we'll hollow out, and then we get a big, like imagine like a monster size mortar and pestle,
Mm-hmm.
but the kind where your mortar is like huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the size of a baseball bat or something, and you're mashing these hickory shells, and then you like sift out the 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 shells, right? And you end up making what's called the hickory nut balls, and you can like put them on wax paper and let them dry out, you know, because they'll keep for like up to I think 4 months. It's like kind of like a old Cherokee survival food, hickory nuts, and then when you go to make the ganache, you just add like a porridge, a hot porridge, and mix it in, and that's something Cherokee have been eating apparently for tens of thousands of years, and it wasn't very glamorous. I mean, today, you know, these days you'll see them adding honey and sugar to it, but originally it was very unglam. Although, you know, hickory nuts are okay, but no matter how hard you try to sift, there's always hard pieces of. It's caveman poop. But
Right.
anyway, apparently the Great Spirit felt so sad for us eating this terrible ganache gruel that grandmother sent down the three sisters, and that was corn, beans, and squash. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
So,
Especially squash.
if you
Squash
really
is
want to make
delicious.
hickory nuts and hickory balls and hickory ball soup, go right
Man.
ahead. But it's a lot of work, and
Yeah.
there's not much payoff at the end. I
Right.
would recommend instead lard and slicing up your squash and breading it, some fried squash, maybe
Yeah.
some
That's
buttered
delicious.
corn on the cob,
That's delicious.
and a good pot of beans. Don't forget the
That's
bacon.
right. That's
All
right.
right, that concludes our food program.
Yeah.
I didn't know we were going to go there, but we went there.
I mean, that's a lot of work with the mortar and all of that. Like I couldn't, man, their arms must have been just buffed out because I grate cheese and after grating cheese, I'm dead. My arms hurt.
Oh,
It's like having to sit there, every day like that, man, the arms just whoo. That's some workout.
imagine the Amish like Weird Al Yankovic, you know, and in the
With the
Amish
butter?
paradise, churning
Yeah.
that butter all day long. Got
Yeah.
churning arms.
Yep, yep. And it's usually the women that was doing it too, so
Of course, in the internet days, now we're in the internet age, so I guess those would be fapping muscles.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's what I was start to go to in my head. Like, how can we not make this sexual?
I was just thinking of stank yogurt or chank yogurt or chanky or whatever his name is.
That's funny, steak yogurt. I've never heard that one before.
Stank yogurt. Ooh, it's no good. It's no longer probiotic. I think it's gone from probiotic to antibiotic. It smells different.
Right. I like that. Oh, Warren, leave me alone about
Speaking
my
of
pill
pro
nuts.
and anti, you said you had looked in a little bit into the latest, we'll call it the Portuguese version of January 6th.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes, yes. Where is
unraveling,
it?
shall we say, like the narrative it is.
Mm-hmm. So
Uh,
I do. I have one from a couple of days ago, and then I found one for today. So I figure we can at least talk about what happened, the history, what's going on there. The is there a similarity between what happened recently in January 6th, or is it their own version? What's going on?
well, of course, Yona is here to provide the critical context and backstory
Yes.
so that you can see that not really the same at
Right.
all. There are things that are going on here, but it's what I call the counter revolution being manipulated by the CIA all across Latin America, where we saw for a brief moment in the late 2000 aughts, 20 aughts, I guess you would call it that decade. I don't know what to call it. The 20 O's, the 20 aughts. Between
Right.
2000 and 2010,
Mm,
basically we'll call it during the Bush years. But, well, there were two President Bushes. So I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway, roughly up until about 10 years ago, and for a good 10 years, we'll say from 2007 to 2017 is what I'll kind of historically phrase this as the pink revolution,
Mm,
roughly is what it was called, because you had a changing of the guard in Cuba. You had Daniel Ortega doing his thing with the Nicaraguenses in Nicaragua. You had Hugo Chavez, right, in Venezuela, who then turned over power to Nicolas Maduro. You had Rafael Correa come to power, who actually came to save the day for Julian Assange and provided Julian Assange um, uh, residence, asylum, political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And Rafael Correa would go on to give Julian Assange Ecuadorian citizenship and everything. Was making moves to get Julian out of London and to Ecuador, but then he left office. Um, and then you had Evo Morales in Bolivia, right? And then all of a sudden you had um, Lula and Dilma managed to take power in Brazil and kind of trade back and forth. And this was the pink revolution, where I guess in the United States, in our American English, we would call like liberal or progressive values. We're kind of taking root of. I kind of shy away from the term socialism,
mm,
because not all socialism is the same, and the truth is, all of the different so-called air quote socialism going on in Latin America is hybridized or creolized, mixed with raw capitalism. So, like, even like with Lula, who is the supposed liberal champion of Brazil, he's all about some jabby jabs, and he's ready to make some IMF big deals and wheels. So, there's elites on both sides, regardless of political stripes, regardless of what language, regardless of what country. But when it comes to American interest, we have what we call Monroe Doctrine, right? Walk softly and carry a big stick. That's Latin America. Well, that's part of America. That's Uncle Sam's backyard. I got to keep things in line around here. Knock y'all upside the head. And tell you what, Venezuela, fuck you. Here's some sanctions. We're going to
mhm.
sanction your ass off. Same for you, Nicaragua. We're coming at you, Honduras. Rafael Correa, get the fuck out. We bought out Lenin Moreno in his little wheelchair there. Got an IMF paquetazo to Ecuador. Made the country go crazy. But Moreno got his money. He sold out Julian Assange, and they carted Julian Assange out of the Ecuador embassy and straight to the Belmarsh prison, where he is now known as prisoner A9379AY Assange Julian at His Majesty's prison. All hail King Charles the Sausage Fingered. I wonder can
Jesus.
I wonder if he's incapable of sweating like Prince. Um,
Right. Probably.
anyways, it all ties back to Epstein, doesn't it? But
Yep.
you look at the case of Evo Morales in Bolivia. Of course, he was overthrown and replaced by Áñez. Most recently, Boluarte has replaced Pedro Castillo, who was forced to step down in in Lima in Peru. Um, whew, it's hard to remember all this stuff and
I
smoke
know.
weed at the same time. But anyways, Brazil is where we're talking about today. Chaos in Brazil. Now, bear in mind, when Americans think of Brazil in the United States, we think of girl from Ipanema, Rio de Janeiro,
Mm-hmm.
maybe Sao Paulo, maybe the Amazon. I'm going to venture to say when Americans think of Brazil, absolutely no one thinks of the city of Brasilia.
Right.
No one. That's because it was created out of thin air and dedicated as Brazil's new capital some 30 years ago in the middle of nowhere. And they just took blueprints and survey plans and drawings and went out there with tripods and stakes and started sending bulldozers here, there, and yon, and voila, in 4 years, brand new capital for Brazil in the middle of fucking nowhere, hundreds of miles from anything. Filled with all, and everyone that's there is pretty much part of the government or getting government money. So imagine like a huge national capital in the middle of nowhere that's like a Hollywood set, and everyone there is paid government checks. And they're so far and completely removed from the rest of the entire country. That's Brasilia. That's the picture you're looking at right now. So it would be like if the United States decided 30 years ago, you know what? We're going to build a brand new national capital where we have the Burning Man Festival on the Salt Flats in the middle of fucking nowhere, Nevada. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to build a city where they had the Burning Man on the Bonnieville Salt Flats, middle of fucking nowhere, right? 200 goddamn miles from Interstate 80's nearest exit, right? And we're going to put this city in the middle of nowhere with like maybe, we'll say 150,000 people, and it's just totally in a cocoon, and it's a Hollywood set. And now all of our national coverage of politics is going to be in this bubble Hollywood set in the middle of fucking nowhere, where you would like have a Burning Man concert or something. So that's Brasilia. So that's the national politic. You know, when I see protests like this happening in the favelas in Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, I take real. You know, it would feel much more like a grassroots organic thing. Whereas Brasilia, you know, it was meant to be in the middle of the country. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the population of Brazil is pretty much concentrated along its Atlantic coast.
Yeah,
up from Salvador down through Rio to Sao Paulo through Curitiba and down to Argentina. And Salvador kind of starts it up at the top there. Yeah, you just passed it.
Okay.
There it is, state of Sergipe, and then Salvador right there, state of Bahia. But
and you got Brasilia
that's like
all the way over here.
Majority of all their population. Yeah. Although there are larger cities, you know, and you've got that massive Amazon back there, but Brasilia's in the middle of nowhere, pretty much in terms of the population, and really wasn't any infrastructure there. I mean, they had to build rail lines, road lines, everything to even get to it. But in terms of Brazil today and what's happened with this and the dispute over the Brazilian elections, first and foremost, Brazil has gone a high tech, as many have. And so when it comes to the Brazilian elections, there's much more of a paper trail. They're more easily auditable by comparison than to the United States, where they're virtually unauditable and unverifiable, and we don't have election observers and nothing of the sort in the United States with compared to Brazil in terms of the election side of it. I mean, I'm by no means an expert. These are just basic facts. Now, on the other hand, when you look at what's the involvement with these political factions, what's the backstory to military general Jair Bolsonaro? Keep that in mind. Whereas Lula da Silva is a unionist, a union organizer type guy, a workers guy. But think all the way at the top, like Jimmy Hoffa type, organize it. So, with that in context and different corruption, um, Glenn Greenwald, who used to write up in New York and was co-founder of the Intercept, and then had to leave the Intercept, and uh, his uh, his husband David Mendes is actual parliament member in Brazil, right? Glenn Greenwald, that one. He's like on Jimmy Dore and other shows all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you could say he speaks Portuguese somewhat. They make fun of his accent down there, but Glenn Greenwald has written much about the big scandal in Brazil, which was Lava Jato, or car wash. Lava Jato, the car wash scandal, the Lava Jato scandal, which ended up bringing a lot of people down. But uh, there were different judges, and it was a major public corruption scandal in Brazil, and that led then to Lula being uh, not only booted out of office, but then arrested, and Dilma arrested for supposed corruption by the Bolsonaro. Well, I shouldn't say Bolsonaro, but really the military rule, because you have to understand that Brazil was under military rule directly through CIA handlers for decades. And the last round of brutal military rule in Brazil under CIA control, Dilma Rousseff, who would become the first female president of Brazil, and is close colleagues with Lula, who was elected president, she was actually tortured during the last military regime by Bolsonaro's colleagues. And he's made jokes and made light of this often about, they should have cranked the voltage even higher on her when they were torturing her, and just weird. Again, it's a very different political dynamic here,
Right.
because we're talking about when Lula and Dilma ended up becoming leaders of Brazil. That's the first time that Brazil was actually maybe trying to assert some, I don't know, sovereignty, instead of just being absolutely tortured and ruled to death by U.S. corporate interest. Which, because when you say CIA, you think, oh, well, that's our government. But again, the CIA doesn't work for you and me or Yona and Jimmy. The CIA works for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Exxon Mobil and whoever else, whatever corporate cock they're sucking these days, whatever dick they ride. And that's who they get their orders from. That's who they work for. They work for the big corporations and their corporate interest overseas, not ours, obviously. I mean, that's what a banana republic is. Latin American countries where whether it's they're moving bananas or bauxite or copper or whatever they're trying to, or timber from the Amazon, whatever, oil from the Amazon, whatever they're trying to get, they just wrench and control the government until they can continue the extraction process to feed their factories and their so-called green industrialization, while they're busily getting more oil and gas and coal. And so whatever, I mean, I'm all for living responsibly, but the people screaming about this green revolution, it's hard to take them seriously when it's BP and Shell Oil and Monsanto wants
Yep.
to talk to Yona about environmentalism. Monsanto, right? Glyphosate, Monsanto. Go fuck yourselves, all you corporations.
Right.
Virtue signal somewhere else.
Right.
Not buying it for 1 second. But back to Brazil. Brazil has, of course, been a jewel of the global South when it comes to constant rape. Um, I highly recommend the book by Eduardo Galeano. I think he's Bolivian or Argentinian. Maybe Bolivian, yeah. Eduardo Galeano, Venas Abiertas de Latin America, the open veins of Latin America, where he talks about how much silver and gold was mined out of South America, and it greatly enriched, well, it was supposed to greatly enrich Spain and Portugal, but of course, there was this banking family that had all these loans that had to be repaid from Spain to them, um, to Rothschild. Anyways, I can't get away from them fucking de Rothschild bankers. So,
Um,
the Spain and Portuguese and the rest of them are empiring it up, and then to pay for their ships that they need to, get to their foreign ports and bring back stuff. Well, they had to borrow money to get the ships out of the shipyard, and that's where they have to pay the Rothschild back for all the transit. And again, my God, the bankers just run everything. But
they,
when we come to what's going on in Brazil, you know, this so-called storming, I mean, I don't see anything similar really in the United States, other than that this is a crafted CIA narrative, and it's very frightening because if there was indeed this much grassroots support, which, to be fair, Brazil is pretty evenly split when it comes to political stripes. But Brazil's like the United States. I would venture that most working poor don't identify with either political stripe because they're both. Which one is going to fuck you harder when it comes to corporations?
right,
I mean, I guess with Lula and Dilma, kiss on the ear, maybe some lubricant, then a
right.
fucking. Whereas with Jair Bolsonaro, you're spitting out teeth. You got black eyes by the time it's done. There's no love involved, and consent is not involved either. So that's the difference between Bolsonaro and Lula. Absolute rapacious fascist military rule versus absolute rapacious capitalism. Sorry, folks, there not really any clear cut good guys here. I mean, Bolsonaro's anti-jab, Lula's pro-jab. So I mean, you could try to make comparisons with the United States and Republican and Democrat, which of course is being done all across the English language right now.
Right.
But in terms of Brazil, we're talking about a previous brutal, decades-long military dictatorship that's flexing
Hmm.
straight, doing the dab right now. That's
Hmm.
dabbing like Migos right now,
Hmm.
saying, hey, we've still got all those electric shock beds ready to go. We're ready to torture again. Literally what they're saying out loud. Let's go back to the good old days when we tortured and raped and disappeared people for 40 years. Fuck all this democracy shit, but you won't have to get jabbed. Trust us. Yeah, whatever.
Right.
Whatever, man. I don't buy it. I think it's just a counter revolution. And sadly, I wish there were better winners. But I'm wondering, how does Breitbart covers this? Because I think of Breitbart as like coming from a white perspective.
Right. So that's what I did find. I got a Breitbart, and the newer one from, I think, either this morning or last night is from Fox News, because I wanted to kind of get an opposite opinion than just the left's opinion. So this was from January 8th, so a few days ago, talking about the riot that happened in Brasilia. It says, while Lula himself was in Sao Paulo state assessing the damage of recent floods, in a public statement following police action to subdue the protesters, Lula announced an official federal intervention, consolidating the public security powers of several agencies into the hands of a hand-picked top-level official, and accused police of acting in bad faith in failing to prevent the protesters from storming the buildings. The incident is an offshoot of months of protests, which we have talked about here. How the protests, or what the, that there has been protests going on following the October presidential election. Lula narrowly defeated Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro opposes Lula's victory as illegitimate on several grounds, including his multiple convictions on charges of corrupt acts occurring during his first two terms as president, which he is correct on that. An audit of the 2022 runoff presidential election featured both of these candidates by the Armed Forces of Brazil concluded that no guarantee could be made of the absence of fraud or irregularities. Protesters also accused STF, particularly its head justice, Moraes, right, of of intervening in the election by censoring mentions of Lula's corruption case and silencing Bolsonaro supporters through fines and police raids, which I have been reading about during the election. Lula da Silva was having any kind of contenders or competition being arrested. So Lula's inauguration occurred without major incident. Last month, Lula's picks for justice minister referred to anti-Lula protest groups as incubators of terrorism,
Mhm.
uh, which Lula has himself even said that these guys are fascists. You know, the same kind of talking, repeating points that the left is saying about the right here in America. That's where I see at least the similarities is the back and forth banter kind of thing.
Well, that's the
Um,
problem when you don't have any good guys. You
yeah,
know, when there's not really any clear winner here, and there's just a whole bunch of losers. And so, when one losing side is calling out the bullshit of the other losing side, and we overhear it, we're like, well, yeah, of course, the 40-year-long fucking military regime raped and tortured and killed, and now they're bragging about it again. They're fascist as fuck. See, they called them fascist. It's like, well,
yep,
spade is spade. But then on the flip side, what's Lula and them talking about? That I mean, you want to talk about World Economic Forum and all about the digital COVID passports and all that shit?
right.
That's the So I
Yeah,
mean, again, there are
it's
similarities between the
yeah,
liberal, progressive, so-called, in Brazil and in the United States. There's also similarities in the fact that this is clearly, considering it only happened in Brasilia and nowhere else. Well, I mean, it's the national capital and BFE, and he's literally responding to a natural disaster in São Paulo, and so Bolsonaro takes his cue to then have this thing happen in Brasilia. But was that really his, or were there, agent provocateur, and were there Portuguese Ray Epses in the crowd saying, "Come on, let's storm it. We got to get this camera shot, right?" And then
hmm
Lula's like, "Haha, see, they're fascists. And that's why I have to do all this stuff." So again, the point being, it doesn't seem organic and seems rather contrived to just the way this has been scripted, much like January 6th in the United States, was much scripted,
right,
very, very scripted, orchestrated. In other words, it was not a spontaneous act. It was clearly a well thought out, planned, orchestrated act with people calling you go here. All right, Ray, go down there and get him over to there. Do your thing, man. And that's what strikes me about Brasilia. The worst thing about this is the fact that it's the people that are getting fucked.
right.
And Bolsonaro, by the way, while Lula has been touring the destroyed area, of course, he was elected president. Bolsonaro's been gallivanting around the world.
Yeah, he was out in
London,
Florida.
Rome, Paris. Is he
Yeah.
back in Boca Grande in Florida again?
Yeah, when this whole thing was happening, the riot was happening, he was down in Miami eating a KFC.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then I guess he got sent to the hospital that night about it. But yeah, no, I absolutely that's like I said, that's where I see the similarities, and I completely agree with you. It's like the people themselves are either they're rioting, they're getting angry, they're getting upset, and they're starting to protest because of a legit fear that they have, going hungry, losing their home, not having to live paycheck to paycheck. And so what they're what these politicians I see doing, even here in Brazil as well, is they're like weaponizing that fear and then
Yep.
blaming the other side for it. So you got the left going around saying that these rights are fascist and they're authoritarian and they're scary, but then you've got the right telling the people that the lefts are communists and socialists and all these bad other things, and it's
And
just
look what they're doing with the jabs, and look what they did with the lockdowns, and look what and again, and that's true. And
yep,
so now what's going to happen? You see this Hegelian situation where, of course, conveniently, where is the U.S. puppet for this Latin American country at? Miami. Where was Juan Guaido? Where were all
in America somewhere.
Manuel Noriega? Let me go down the list. I mean,
Right.
because Miami is the Latin American capital in the United States. There's literally three major Spanish language broadcasters that broadcast their signal from Miami, like Univision, Galavisión, right? Um, and you've got little Cuba there, right? Little Havana, next to downtown Miami and South Beach. And literally all of the little dictatorships that the United States has coddled throughout Latin America, they're all brought to Miami and they're given a nice little condo to live in like it's Grand Theft World, like Tony Montana type shit. And that's Miami. I mean, that's CIA Central. That's where they ran the Bay of Pigs failed invasion of Cuba before. I mean, it's um and so of course he's gallivanting around between Mar-a-Lago Resort where Trump is
Right.
and Little Havana while this is going down. And so what you see what's happening, Jimmy, what this is building up to is Americans and Brazilians alike are going to scream, please, we need more red rule. Out with the blue, lockdown, limousine liberals. These tyrannical socialist commie fucks have got to make way for some freedom and liberty and fascism.
Mm.
Yeah, make the people beg for the black boot.
Mm-hmm.
Please, please stomp on my face harder and grind with your boot, please.
Right. That's what people do because they it's like we have amnesia. Anything before 10 years of where we're at now, it's like people are like, oh well, I thought it was good 10 years ago because inflation was different and pay was different and the pay gap was different and stuff. So people are like, oh, it was so much better back then. But you're not doing anything to make things good again by going backwards. You can't bring back that type of lifestyle and expenses and economy. You've got to, it's going to be the same laws and rules just with what we're dealing with now. So it's not any better whatsoever.
Boy, they are having some fun at the IMF these days on the 3D chessboard. I got to tell you what,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's not just Brazil. I mean, there's also massive protests in France. But go ahead.
Yes. So this is the newest one that we have, the Fox News one. It says Brazil is bracing for a new wave of pro-Bolsonaro protests following last week's little shindig. So they're bracing today under the renewed threat of mass protests by supporters of Jair Bolsonaro after they raided the nation's capital. Sunday attacks were not only an eerie Fox is saying the Sunday attacks are not only an eerie copy of the riots on the U.S. Capitol, but came just 2 days after the anniversary of the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Brazil's leftist president Lula da Silva took precautionary measures and bolstered security nationwide after renewed calls to retake power were circulated on flyers and social media by pro-Bolsonaro groups. Lula's chief of staff said we have measures for this Wednesday to reinforce security throughout the country since pamphlets of new demonstrations have been circulated. Security officials have been ordered not to allow roadblocks or any invasion of public buildings, a temporary ban on demonstrations, Businesses found to be funding anti-democratic protest will also be fined. Bolsonaro lost. Okay, I think this is
Yeah,
going
that
into.
you just where you just scrolled past, that's actually a picture of General Jair Bolsonaro.
Right.
And every time I see Bolsonaro, I always see him in his military outfit with all the medals and shit, and it's a
Yeah. Okay, and he's
cute
not
little
wearing it.
hat and
Okay.
everything. Because I always see him as the general, not as a civilian politician type. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Anyways, context, context.
So pretty much all it's saying is that they're looking out for possibly more new protests. It says here at the very bottom, the authorization of more than 100 buses full of pro-Bolsonaro protesters into the city was also cited in the arrest warrant. And Bolsonaro has been in Florida since December following his loss, and President Biden has faced pressure to expel the former president. That's pretty much the end of it. They're just waiting for more. I can see. Let's see if there's anything else because I was looking it up this morning, and some places are talking about it. Like Politico did one 2 hours ago. Washington Post did one 19 minutes ago. So it looks like they're still talking about it.
You know how they always talk about the swamp as the analogy for corruption, like Washington D.C. is the swamp.
Right.
Well, uh, I do believe the single largest swamp yet still in the United States of America is the Everglades. I mean, literally, Miami was nothing but a swamp until uh, John D. Rockefeller, the leader of Standard Oil Company, which was split into the Seven Sisters. If you've not seen the documentary by James Corbett on how big oil rules the world, um, or how big oil conquered the world, that's a great documentary explaining how the Rockefellers came to rule the world with their oil company, Standard Oil. But anyways, Rockefeller's right hand man, Henry uh, M. Flagler, actually built the Florida East Coast Rail Line down through from Jacksonville south along the East Coast, the Florida East Coast Rail. And like the Mar-a-Lago resort that I mentioned earlier in Palm Beach, Florida, home of the Donald Trump. Um, that was actually a planned development by Standard Oil Company. Standard Oil Company developed all of South Florida along the East Coast. They Because before they went there, it was all swamp. All of it was Everglades swamp, and it was Standard Oil Company that went in with canal dredging barges and everything, and literally drained the swamp and built resorts along their new rail line to entice New Yorkers to go down and snowbird down to Florida. And what they began is now an actual national trend every year of snowbirds that go from the New England states and winter down in Florida. And so, particularly around Miami, Miami is packed during December, January, and February. That's when all the movers and shakers are bustling and about. And so it's interesting that Bolsonaro, again, you have the election season, but this is when wheels and deals are being made and cut behind closed doors, cigars, smoke filled rooms. Think of like the movie Godfather, Jimmy, where they like go down to the resort. uh, what was his name? I can't remember all the characters' names on these movies, but uh, the the Jew banker guy down in Hollywood, Florida, and the Corleone family goes down there to meet with all the other mafia families. Hyman Roth, that's his name. Hyman Roth. And they go to meet down there and of course he's on a canal in Florida and everything. And they're all sitting around the table and divvying up territory and fixing prices and stuff. And that's literally what they do in Florida every day. I'm sure that's what Bolsonaro has been going over with the corporate powers that shouldn't be down in Miami. As I would not at all be surprised to see Lula deposed once again and for military rule to step in. Um, wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop at this point.
Right. I did find a video that's talking about it recently. Uh, some of the few journalists I actually do kind of trust when it comes to this stuff is Aaron Matei. Max Blumenthal is another one I would pretty much trust. Yeah. But he did show it was on the Jimmy Dore show when he was talking about it. So it's got a little bit of Jimmy Dore promotion in here. But I do really appreciate Aaron Matei's take on this. So we'll watch a little bit of this and see what he has to say about what's going on in Brazil.
Is this from the Jagoff Garage Studios in beautiful Pasadena, California?
Happening
yes.
in Brazil. Here's the headline. Neo-fascists after Bolsonaro supporters storm Congress. Brazilian President Lula da Silva has toured the wreckage of his presidential palace after an extraordinary day of political violence in the capital, Brasilia, saw thousands of far-right extremists run riot through the country's democratic institutions in a failed attempt to overthrow his weak-old government. Shocking video footage showed pro-Bolsonaro militants sprinting up the ramp into the Palacio do Planalto, the presidential offices, roaming the building's corridors and vandalizing the nearby Supreme Court, whose windows had been smashed. Here's some video there. There it is. Lula was not in Brasilia at the time of the attack, but he gave an angry speech blaming Bolsonaro for the chaos and promising that anyone involved will be punished. Bolsonaro, of course, was Lula's predecessor, who, upon Lula's entry into office, after Lula defeated him in a recent vote, Bolsonaro fled to the U.S. Now he is in Miami. And allies of Bolsonaro conspired to imprison Lula while Bolsonaro was the president. So it's a very fraught situation right now. Military police in Brasilia were conspicuous by their absence on Sunday, and the mobs faced little opposition as they marched toward three branches of government. On Sunday night, the Supreme Court justice ordered Ibanez Rocha, the pro-Bolsonaro governor of the federal district where Brasilia is located, to be removed from his post for 90 days amid outrage that authorities failed to prevent the attack. Well, let me bring in two guests now. Joining us from Sao Paulo, Brazil, is Camila Escalante. She is editor at Cossachen News and a Latin American correspondent for Press TV. And we're also joined by Michael Fox. He is a Brazil-based journalist and the host of the podcast Brazil on Fire. Welcome to you both. Camila, I'll start with you. Talk to us about where you are and what's happening.
Well, I'm in Sao Paulo, and there was a massive march here. There have been marches all day, mobilizations in all the state capitals of Brazil, and other actions also in small towns repudiating what took place yesterday. People here, of course, call it terrorism. They say that this was an act carried out by fascists, by those loyal to, as you said, Jair Bolsonaro, and they want to make sure that their vote, which took place on October 30th, is respected. They want to make sure that the social movements here do their part in order to maintain the government in power, because all the threats that have taken place, obviously, the PT government of Dilma Rousseff suffered a coup, and they believe that they're the ones who brought Lula to the presidency and this government, and they are ensuring that their project gets pushed from the bottom. So here we have social movements from across the social movement spectrum. We're talking the urban housing movements, as well as the land reform, agrarian reform movements. We have football teams here. There are fan clubs that are anti-fascist fan clubs. The biggest and loudest one here is Corinthians. If you're familiar with Sao Paulo or Brazilian football, there's actually 4 different Sao Paulo football fan clubs here, and they all kind of call themselves anti-fascist. And that is that they participate in a lot of these sorts of mobilizations, denouncing racism, denouncing xenophobia, and denouncing hate that they say has been carried out in a systematic way by not only Bolsonaro, but his allies and a lot of the other right-wing politicians around the country, particularly since Bolsonaro became more prominent on the political scene here. So this march has gone down Paulista Avenue. It's the large avenue here, very important, and it's tens of thousands of people. And this has been taking place similarly across the country all day. We're seeing images of massive crowds in all parts of the country. People are really angry. They're demanding, they're saying no amnesty. They don't want to see any impunity for what took place, the vandalism, what they consider to be violent attacks. And, it's not just what took place yesterday in Brasilia that they're denouncing. They want to see a total dismantling now with the decree that was signed by Lula yesterday of all of the protest camps, so-called protest camps, all of the different actions, road blockades that are taking place across the country, many of which have fizzled out, but some of which continue in a lot of the states controlled by right-wing governors. So they want to see those completely come to an end. They are having a slight economic impact, but they do impact people's day-to-day lives.
Michael Fox, for people who are not familiar with Brazilian politics and the backstory here, what is the important background that we should know about what just took place?
Wow. We can go back a long way, but I won't, I promise. Look, it's important to remember 2016, Dilma Rousseff, then president, is ousted in a constitutional coup, in a congressional coup that takes her from office, right? She was obviously Lula's former chief of staff, who had come to power, and she was in power for roughly 6 years after Lula had been around for about 8 years. She's ousted, and during that time, then Lula is jailed. He's jailed back in 2018 in the lead up to the 2018 election. He's jailed on trumped up charges, which have been tossed out by courts, and all the other accusations against him are all tossed out by courts. But his jailing enables Bolsonaro to come to power, and what he pushes and what he brings to Brazil is what some people call a pseudo-fascism, what some people call a fascism. It's the Trump of the tropics. He brings in policies that are clearly pro-white supremacy, racist, full-on backlash against social movements, black communities, indigenous communities, and that's what he unrolls around the country. And during his time in office, the parallels between the United States are really, really key here, Aaron. We have to understand that it's all very, very similar to what we saw with Trump. And during this time, he keeps his supporters energized by telling them that they need to get out on the streets, they need to protest, that other people are trying to stop him from doing what he wants to do. And he starts to create these anti-democratic protests. He gets people out in the streets to march against the Supreme Court, to march against Congress, telling them they're trying to push back on his government. And of course, Bolsonaro is a former captain in the Brazilian dictatorship who's called for dictatorship for forever. He's called for coups for forever. And so this is all the context within which we see this. Of course, we understand that he left 2 days early. He kind of fled or flew to the United States 2 days before Lula's inauguration. Lula comes to power officially. Of course, he's elected back in late October by more than 2 million votes. Lula comes to power. He's inaugurated on January 1st. And huge mobilizations, 200,000 people for the inauguration, just this amazing sense of hope. And then, of course, just yesterday, Bolsonaro's people hit the streets and move in and push their way into the Capitol in a copycat.
Not just yesterday. I've been reporting on this. There was protest right as soon as he lost, and they've not just stopped. It just got more organized and centralized to a certain area. So that, I think that's
really good commentary there on the part of Camila and Michael there on giving critical context. Great coverage there from Aaron Mate at Jimmy Dore Show to get these guests on here and give such a critical perspective on what's actually taking place there, because it's very disturbing, particularly to see how basically the progressive liberal type thinking ideology sector of the population, by embracing this medical tyranny, has at the same time embracing all of this virtue signaling, has now become the perfect vilified enemy of these people that are advocating for freedom and liberty. And meanwhile, I have to say that people in the United States, and I would say people in Brazil, in large part, do not identify with either political party per se. It's more about issues than it is about ideology. And so the issue in Brazil is about fascist dictatorship. That and as they were pointing out, that of course, soccer is the biggest thing in Brazil. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest thing for them, and so much of that it is centered around this constant resistance to the brutal U.S. armed and supported military dictatorships in Brazil. And we basically have a brutal military dictatorship in the United States right now, but no one really talks about it that way. I mean, if you look at the numbers of Americans that are imprisoned, incarcerated, or on probation or parole, my God, we make up 4% of the world's population, and yet nearly 40% of all human beings that are in cages are American citizens of the United States. Mm-hmm. Scratch your head. That's a brain pretzel there. And then you look at all of our law enforcement agencies and all of the constant FBI interviewed maniacs that go on to immediately commit some strange act of terror or killing or death or something. And then they immediately say, he had just been interviewed by the FBI, or he was on the FBI's list or something. It's like, really? Again? Geez, just like the shoe bomber, just like the underwear bomber, just like this one, just like the plot against Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then they found out, well, 15 of the 16 guys were actually Spider-Man. And they're all pointing at each other in this meme where they all say, Fed.
Yep.
Anyways, what great commentary.
Yes.
Great commentary.
All right.
Image of January 6th, very, very clear that this was not just influenced, but coordinated and organized with the support and with the collusion of people like Steve Bannon and whatnot in the United States, and of course Bolsonaro. And they attack the three, they attack the Supreme Court, Palacio Planalto, which of course is Lula's presidential palace, and Congress, and just wreak havoc, creating so much devastation. So, I mean, that's the context. You have to understand that Bolsonaro was essentially pushing for this the entire time, pushing fake news, incentivizing hate, incentivizing violence, and that's what his people, ultimately did yesterday in this just insane copycat. What's important just to understand is that what Lula's inauguration a week ago, what that represented was the return of democracy for so many people, the return of hope, going back to 6 years, going back to that coup against Dilma Rousseff. And what this was is a failed attempt that we saw yesterday by Bolsonaro's supporters to oust Lula, with the hope, of course, that then the military would rise up in their defense, and then Bolsonaro would fly in. And part of this is because they actually believe this. This is what they've been seeing and hearing over Twitter. People over the far-right Twitter sphere in Brazil have been talking about the potential for that, oh, don't worry, just keep holding on, the military's going to rise up, and Bolsonaro's going to be back soon. So that's kind of the general context. Of course, that's really broad, but that's what we're looking at.
And I think I made a mistake. I said that Lula was jailed under Bolsonaro. Is it actually that he was jailed to prevent him from running against Bolsonaro? Is that what happened?
That's exactly what it was. He was jailed in April of 2018. Yeah. Bolsonaro came into power. Now, what's important here, though, is the man who jailed his jailer, former judge, Senator Moro, who was the head of the car wash operation, was then brought on as Bolsonaro's justice minister. And then Lula was then freed 580 days after he was jailed, so about 9 months into Bolsonaro's presidency.
Right. Camilla, talk to us more about who these protesters, these rioters are, and what they did when they attacked these government buildings.
Sorry, I'm being told that I should maybe move because there might be clashes between the two sides. But I'll keep talking. So, this is a big part of the investigation that began yesterday, that began immediately once, Lula got off the air from where he was in the interior city of Sao Paulo. He said that, we're going to hold these people accountable. We're going to hold them to justice, and we're going to do so swiftly. One of the things, they've been saying since yesterday, the leader of the president of the Workers' Party, Lacey Hoffman, as well as Lula, in his statements yesterday afternoon, they've been saying we need to look into agribusiness. We need to look into those who have illegal mining and illegal logging interests. And the reason is, this camp that's taking place in Brasilia, which should be dismantled today, it's not something that people just came and showed up and they're just kind of hanging out and having like kind of a outdoorsy time. It's actually, there are videos circulating online that shows that they have extremely high quality and large amounts of meat. They're having huge cookouts. They're having barbecues. I mean, they're living really well. They have all of the amenities for a really nice camp out. So, they're getting this as donations, and they're getting a lot of funds and resources and material support from someone. So one of the things that has been investigated that they said right off the bat yesterday, the Minister of Justice said that they had identified those who had paid for the buses. They said 40 buses, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but 40 buses had bussed in people from other states to participate in this, action, coup attempt, whatever you want to call it. They weren't people who were necessarily already in this protest camp by the army barracks. They're people who came from different states. This costs money. They say they have the names, they've identified those people. But in addition, they are looking into the hotels. They have requested that the hotels send the names and hand over, the people who have entered Brasilia and have been staying in the last few days since January 5th, because they said a lot of people have come, apart from the activities that took place around the inauguration. That was on January 1st. That ended. And so a whole lot of other people came just days before this storming of the Esplanade. And so they're going to be looking into who those people are. So it's going to get really loud here for a second.
All right.
Oh, you're muted, Jimmy. You're muted.
Thank you so much. Really quick for a second, from what she's saying, how like a couple of rich people, paid for them to have really good campouts and buses, it almost seems like this was paid by rich people to get them to go and do something for them, almost like a psyop a little bit, like a coup. A little.
We saw the same thing in the United States when like Tea Party things would happen, or like with these different so-called right groups in the United States, where I know, for example, where I was the communicator spoke in our local Occupy Wall Street in Huntington, West Virginia. We started our occupation in front of the Chase Bank 4 days after the initial occupation began in Zuccotti Park in New York City. And so we had one of the longest running Occupy camps in the whole country, in solidarity with them up in Manhattan. And ultimately, Obama crushed them all in December with a coordinated national takedown. But nonetheless, after we had held that ground and protested and done interviews and stuff with some of the radio stations, we couldn't get any of the TV stations to cover it. But about 4 weeks into it, with our General Assemblies getting bigger and bigger every day with the Spirit Fingers, we had them at 4 o'clock every day, and we kept stacking all that stuff. And finally, all of a sudden, across the street rolls in 2 rented vans, and the the College Republicans Club from Marshall University is there with like 15 rich kids. And they're literally opening up cardboard boxes out of the back of the vans and getting all these protest signs already made, just tearing them out of plastic. And then they all form up to make their counter protest to us. And all of a sudden, the 3 major TV stations all show up and put cameras on them. And they cover that at 6 o'clock. So the first coverage of our protest after 3 weeks is when the Republicans show up across the street with their counter protest of 12, 13 people. They never turn the camera toward us to show the hundreds of us up and down the sidewalk, the 15 tents, the library tent, the cooking tent, none of that. And then we went, hey, are you going to talk to us? Oh, we'll talk to you when we get done. Soon as they got done with their thing, they turned on the lights. It was literally like lights, camera, action. And they turned on the bright lights. And then they started doing their whole anti-protest thing, acting like they're protesting over there. Literally, as soon as they got done, they cut the lights out. And I go over like, okay, are you going to do our interview now? They're like, oh, we got something else, breaking news. And they all jump in the vans and leave. And the guys across the street, they all jump in their vans and leave. And literally within 30 minutes, if you hadn't been at our camp, you wouldn't even known it happened. But that was all. It was all over the news and the papers.
Wow.
And that was Huntington, West Virginia, in the midst of our Occupy Wall Street thing. So,
Wow.
It's funny how they shaped that. Now, obviously, it just occurred to me, I dropped 4 entire albums the other day, over 4 hours of play. But particularly, there's one song that I made with the help of my friend Teeny, a.k.a. ICU, who speaks Portuguese as a first language. And because I wrote and performed a song in Brazilian Portuguese. And the video for it is in Brazil. The introduction for my song and video is about 35-second long speech by Lula, the current president of Brazil and the man of the hour right now. So obviously, at some point before we end this stream, we will get in that song. It's called Chega, Chega. And I had to put it on Rumble because YouTube, we're not going to talk about YouTube right now, but I'll drop the link to your Twitter DM there to queue that up whenever you want to drop that, either now or later or whatever.
You got it.
Camilla, let's.
Here.
No, it's you're right in the thick of it. It sounds better now.
Okay, so what I was going to say is, there's a lot of speculation, particularly from the U.S. journalists and people who are kind of, concerned with what happened here, comparing it to January 6th. And, one of the questions they've asked, maybe Mike Fox is a little more plugged into U.S. politics and everything, is in what way was there some sort of cooperation with U.S. Figures, such as Steve Bannon, such as, let's say, right-wing Fox News TV hosts? Or do they have some sort of communication with Jair Bolsonaro supporters here in Brazil? These are really important questions to ask. They will all be a part of the investigation. But it's also really important to ask, although there could be some sort of support for what's going on here from the United States agencies and personalities in the United States, to really get to the bottom of who's behind this within Brazil. Within Brazil, there are countless different interests, as I said, as well as, those sorts of partnerships with the transnationals, all of which have very specific interests in the different territories in the Amazon. And, they know that, Lula might have all sorts of different policies. We might call them social democratic. But we know that he has made some very firm commitments to the indigenous communities and Afro-descendant peoples, particularly in the Amazon, in the North, in the Northeast, people that have been historically marginalized and very vulnerable, having to do with his policies towards the environment. So this is what needs to be investigated right now.
Michael Fox, if there's anything you want to add to that. And also, you mentioned earlier that there's the goal among some supporters of Bolsonaro to trigger a military revolt. Do you see any prospect of that happening?
So I just add that Camila's right on. From what I heard, there was actually 100 buses or more. There have now been, and just to kind of give some of the latest figures, because Camila's been on the street doing it like throughout the day, interviewing people, and it's amazing. And mad props to Camila, because she's like here 1 minute, she's over in Bolivia another, covering the attempted coup in Bolivia. It's just amazing. But the latest figures, I just saw there are some reports that as many as 1,200 Bolsonaro supporters have now been arrested in Brasilia. And the images that we've seen throughout the day of many of those pro-Bolsonaro camps being taken down, and that's happening around the country. So that was one of the requests, not the request, but the mandates from the Supreme Court Justice Alexandre Moraes, who issued 9 different measures, decrees essentially, last night, saying, listen, the most important one being we need to take down every single one of these Bolsonaro camps. Now, I don't know if all of them have been taken down around the country, but we've been seeing images across the day, seeing them being taken down. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, though the camp in Brasilia has been taken down. There was concerns last night around this because there was almost a standoff between military police and then the military themselves. The military police had been action in order to take down the camp, and many of these camps are in front of military barracks, and so there's a question of jurisdiction. This kind of begs your question, right? You were just saying, Aaron, about is there any concern that some of them might actually, the military might actually want to stand up, kind of, potentially in defense of some of these Bolsonaro supporters. And what we're seeing so far is that the military is complying with the mandates from the Supreme Court, and that goes in line with what we've expected. There are obviously members of the Brazilian military that support Bolsonaro. There's a smaller group of members of the military that have always been in favor of dictatorship, that didn't want to return to a democracy back in the mid-'80s, and would love to see a coup scenario return to democracy. To a dictatorship. So obviously they are ones that are in support of Bolsonaro, and they have gotten more positions of clout, or they gained more positions of clout during the Bolsonaro government. So obviously there are those sectors, and there was obviously collusion between military police with. It's the same thing that happened in DC, the exact same thing, where the police basically just opened the doors and they moved out of the way and said, okay, go on in. Now, it's also important to remember that, and I think Camila had mentioned this in the beginning, the man in charge of security for Brasilia was the former Minister of Justice under Bolsonaro. So after Bolsonaro left, and he became the man in charge of security for Brasilia, he's now fled to the United States. In fact, he left even before things went down in Brasilia yesterday, and now at this point he's been fired. And so that happened, of course, once Lula said, all right, we're declaring federal intervention into the police force in Brasilia.
He fled to America too. That's interesting. Did not know that.
Well, he had a hot date in Miami. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
He'd already paid for the buses. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Oh man, the plot thickens,
and that's what we're seeing around the country. So all signs point to the fact that the military is going to comply. It's going to go along with the Lula administration. This is what we've been seeing for a very long time. And why is that? Because they don't have, there's no support within the elite, the Brazilian elites, to do some sort of crazy coup scenario. The people that have been on the street, the people that attack and sack Brasilia, are a small minority sector of Bolsonaro supporters. And so that's, of course, and they don't want to lose. The military doesn't want to lose its clout that it's gained over the last, 30 or 40 years since the end of the dictatorship for someone like Bolsonaro. And so that's kind of where things stand right now. It is actually potentially a very positive scenario for Lula, because it means that the rest of the country might actually rally around Lula and really put Bolsonaro's back against the wall. And even people who would have voted for Bolsonaro might be more than willing to give Lula a try, because, of course, they don't want to be in cahoots with people that are breaking the government building, something like we've never seen in history. So,
Camila, as Michael said, you have a lot of experience covering events like this across Latin America. Anything else you want to add that stands out to you from the reporting you've done so far in Brazil?
Well, I have to say, every single time I cover something like this, the way you characterize it, it's completely different. Sometimes there are some similarities. There's similarities, overlaps in what's going on in Bolivia and Peru, with the coup that's going on. But I want to stress again what I just said earlier about the material support being provided for these pro-Bolsonaro cells. It's not typical. You have to think about the character of the people who are, participating in these camps and these protests. I've been to Bolsonarista protests here in Sao Paulo. They might actually be here now. They were given 24 hours to be dismantled, and so they're probably leaving today. We have social movements, in this country that organize on a mass scale. It's highly sophisticated organizing. I mean, as far as if we're comparing it to any of the popular organizations in other countries, but obviously in North America, there's no sort of articulation like that. So when you see a social movement at a protest and they have a tent or a truck or a sound truck, it's like one. And we know how they get their money. In the case of the landless workers movement, they literally produce food, and some of it is sold within the country. Other things are actually exported internationally. There's all sorts of ways that these social movements maintain themselves. In the case of these Bolsonaristas, if you go to the protest, it's a lot of individuals. It is not these celebrity right-wing talking people on talk radio, or the sorts of podcasters that have the sorts of far-right extremist commentary. It's not all celebrities. It's actually a lot of very, I would say, humble working class people with no real affiliation to a lot of right-wing groups. They might not be a member of a party. It's not anyone who could come together and assemble that sort of of a demonstration. It's all of the tents, it's all of the trailers and the toilets and everything that they have going on. They are getting tons of money funneled to them in order to carry this out, and it needs to be traced back to its roots. But I do have to say as well, this is a very large country by population.
Yeah, she makes a really great point. Even she mentioned it earlier too, and it hadn't even struck my mind yet until she mentioned it too. Was, the funding that these far, quote unquote far right people you're being funded by probably have their own motive behind everything too. I mean, Bolsonaro allowed the Amazon to be just almost completely, pretty much demolished. Indigenous rights were taken away and land was taken away from indigenous people who had those rights. And of course, behind the scenes of all of that were oil companies and the likes. So it makes sense that, they would get these kind of fundings to be like, yeah, go ahead and storm the capital of Brazil and we'll help, fund it, not letting the people know that, they've got their own motives behind the scenes. It's one of those things that are obviously always in front of your face, but you never see it, until it's said.
Well, it's basically might makes right and white makes fright. Scare yourself into inferiority. And the truth is, this whole idea of white supremacy and whiteness is so strange because, you're talking about your heritage, your ancestry, and I don't think anyone, when they look into their genealogy, when they find out, again, I say this all the time, but when you find out your grandparents or great grandparents or whatever came from Scotland, you don't think, oh, they were white. No, you think they were Scottish. Arr! Eating haggis, right? They're from Glasgow, the Glaswegians or what? They were Scottish, like kilts and shit, right? It has its own. There's actually Scottish Gaelic, entirely different language from English. Again, same thing. You go back to your grandparents and they came from Prussia or Estonia. Again, somehow it's all now just white. And the same thing in Brazil, whether they came from Portugal or the Canaries or whatever part of the Western civilized world. Now it's just white. And again, it's in order to identify with this conquistador mentality that life, children, women, everything that exists is property to be owned, managed, and enjoyed by men. So children will take the last name of the man. Wives will take the last name of the man. The land and everything, I like this creek. I'm going to give this creek my name. I like this mountain. I'm naming this mountain after myself too. All right, are all the Indians dead? Well, let's begin mining. And so here we are today, and we still have this fake construct of the white conqueror. When what the fuck are you conquering? And what the fuck is white? And of course, it's all been wiped and vanished away to where no longer do we refer to the conqueror as a conqueror or a robber baron or a monopolist. They were rebranded as philanthropists, and today we call them job creators. But they're just conquerors. I'm a job creator. I clear cut all this forest. I've enslaved all the tribes, and now they're working in my palm oil factories. See, I'm a job creator. It's all euphemism. Empire, the imperial lexicon is made of just escalations of euphemism. So shell shock, battle fatigue becomes post-traumatic stress disorder becomes, just call it PTSD. If you don't know what the letters mean, then you'll be totally antiseptic to the ears. Oh, he's got the PTSD. What the fuck is that? Now you have to explain it because the euphemism has become so obscure that it's lost all its meaning. The whole point is to destroy the meaning of words. Define what a woman is. I don't know if I really want to define what a woman is. I mean, there's the chromosome thing, but it's kind of a fluid discussion. It's dangerous to be defining words. Better to redefine words. Again, euphemisms and stuff, destroying the language. But circling back to the main point here, what was I talking about? I don't know. I got hot. Oh, you're on mute.
I did it again. It's because my heater was clicking. So no, actually that's perfect because that curtails into the next thing that has to do with like colonialism and changing words around to make people think that we're doing good stuff. Since we're talking about other countries and things like that too, is I was just reading this recently. This came out yesterday about U.S. and Russia are clashing over extremism in Africa. America, which I always say if there's one place America should never try to go and help out again, it's Africa, are starting to get involved in wanting to be a part of Africa now because Russia's been there. So we're gonna read through this, and you're gonna hear a lot of like these words that you were saying, that this language that they use to make themselves sound good, and these other people sound like the bad guys, and so that way
Oh
they
my
can get what
gosh.
they want.
Literally the very, very last song that I made, recorded, and made a music video and uploaded is literally the most incredible video footage that was recovered and renovated in Brussels, Belgium, because the Congo was taken over by King Leopold of Belgium, hence the Belgian Congo. Anyways, they're the ones that went in and enslaved the tribes and had the slave labor then build railroads so they could then pull out coal and cobalt and other minerals and trees, and then in its place they then put in banana plantations. But anyways, this video is like black and white, and it's silent, of course. But the video footage that was recovered and renovated was the oldest video footage, I think, in Belgium, maybe. It's like from 1907 or something. Anyways, it was like over 50 minutes long, and I spliced it up to show. And so that's another song, if you want. It's called Boma Bom, BOMABOM. And of course, the song is in Portuguese. Yes, which cut the, you know what? Well, the one song with Lula is like 2 minutes long. Boma Bom is like 5 minutes long. So maybe you can do both. I'll put the link to Boma Bom. But anyway, it's not about my music. It's just the serendipity. You're literally talking about the stuff in Africa. And the UN forces supported by the United States in West Africa and the Sahel that Russia is complaining about. I actually have a clip of the UN commander, and that's the introduction to the Yona rap song in French, where I rap about the Communauté Financière Africaine. That's the name of the rap song. And that, thanks again to Tupac and Lil Wayne for doing guest raps on my song. Really appreciate that, guys. That song, CFA, Communauté Financière Africaine, refers to the African financial community, which is these countries in West Africa, including Central African Republic, Mali, Burkina Faso, Senegal, and on and on. And they all use what's called the CFA franc as their currency. And so all of their money is still going through Paris, France banking. And so it's still controlled by Europe, all of West Africa. And it's a major oil and gas region. One of the major competitors to feeding Europe's oil and gas is West Africa. So it's ironic that Russia is calling out what's going on in West Africa and how Europe and the U.S. are meddling. And anyway.
Yeah, no, just wait till we get to the article because it's not only just U.S. and Russia that are
Uh-huh.
blaming Russia right now. It's wild to
Right.
see.
But yet
what
they're
we're
using
doing.
the French franc,
Right,
not
exactly.
the Russian ruble, right, Jimmy? You figured it out.
Right, absolutely. All right, so before we get over to that, I want to get to your video. What is it? How is it pronounced? I don't want to pronounce it wrong.
Shega.
Shega. All right, here we go. Oh, do I trust Hillary Clinton? Wow, that's a really interesting ad. Gotta love
I'm not suicidal, so I'm going to click not.
that one alone.
I don't want to be Arkansas-ed.
Conseguirão deter a chegada da primavera e a nossa luta é em busca da primavera.
Desde São Paulo surgiu brilhante no Lava Jato, já que agora o inverno passou, chega a primavera. Cuidado com as palavras que você usa. This is Rio de Janeiro.
Wow.
Nunca será. These slopes that are covered with slummy-looking houses. Those big mountain slopes covered with houses all the way to the ridge tops. Yeah. Those are the slums that are called favelas. Favela.
Yeah.
Favela. Favelas. Because largely they don't have any streets. And so you're talking about block after block after block after block. And the only way to get anywhere is to walk up and down stairs or dirt paths. It's too steep even for like motorcycles in a lot of places. Yeah. And so like they have these in like Colombia and other places too. And like in Bogota, for example, they have these slums on hillsides where the only way they've been able to put in a mass transit system was to put gondola systems like a ski lift type thing to go in there because there's no roads, there's nothing. Yep. It's just literally houses built. One roof starts at the basement of the next house. It's crazy. Yep. Lula acopitada e now I travel todo quarto. Desde São Paulo surgiu brilhante no Lava Jato. Desde São Paulo surgiu brilhante no Lava Jato.
So many people.
Yeah, this has got John Pilger, the Australian journalist, at the end.
If Julian is extradited to the United States, I think it will effectively end real, independent, investigative journalism. Who will take that risk again? If the United States can reach anywhere in the world and take a journalist for writing something or revealing something it doesn't approve of.
What great double meaning the end of that had. That was really good.
Wow.
Jesus Christ. Wow. You always,
and that's a completely original song. All original. I used a sample of the drums. Everything else, every instrument and singing, 100%, you know, that's the first song I've ever done in Portuguese.
That is so pretty. And the visuals with it too, like it just keeps you riveted to it. So
that video actually led to one of the strikes that killed my original channel.
Oh no. That's bullcrap.
and yet I've posted it everywhere else, and I never got problems out of it. So
Right. Right.
I'll put the link to the video the video I was talking about that they restored from the original reels that it was
Mhm.
made on in Brussels, Belgium, about the French conquering of Africa. So I'll let you get into this because this really gets into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. We can start
you
yelling
got it.
about it.
You're right on top of it. You're so
Yep.
smart.
Just try to keep up with you. So, at the United Nations, it says the United States accused Russian military contractors backed by the Kremlin on Tuesday of interfering in the internal affairs of African countries and increased the likelihood that violent extremism will grow in the Sahel region, which is facing increasing attacks and deteriorating security, an allegation Russia denied. Just by that alone, I had to go off just even with that first paragraph. I'm pretty sure that Americans have brought way more violence and extreme violence to Africa than any other country that has probably been there or is there now. Just saying. So the U.S. Deputy Ambassador Richard Mills lashed out at the Wagner Group at a UN Security Council meeting on West Africa and the Sahel, accusing its paramilitary forces of failing to address the extremist threat, robbing countries of their resources, committing human rights abuses, and endangering the safety and security of UN peacekeepers and staff. So they're pretty much saying that Russian military groups or paramilitary groups are failing to address threats, robbing countries of resources, committing human rights abuses, and endangering any UN, here's the words, peacekeepers, as if, Russia has a paramilitary and it's not doing anything to keep the peace, but the
Heavily
UN
armed
definitely.
peacekeepers. I mean, it's really rich because the following sentence, I'll help you with the French here. France's political counselor, Isis Jarot d'Arnaud, echoed Mills, saying the model used by Wagner mercenaries has proven totally ineffective in combating terrorism. He cited the nefarious and devastating impact of its work and its human rights violations, including alleged killings in Mali. Meanwhile, what has France done in Mali? What has Belgium done in the Congo? Oh boy. Oh boy. And then, of course, uh, just for mildly insulting the King of Belgium, Patrice Lumumba was executed by the CIA. And, up until recently, CIA was backing Mobutu, who was a terrible, terrible dictator. And they finally now have a somewhat of a semblance of democracy, but it's the Congo. And again, the IMF is really running roughshod over the Congo and West Africa and Brazil for that matter. That's the common denominator, the International Monetary Fund, which I believe is still being run by Christian Lagarde, who is a French banker who's done a lot of deals in that CFA franc, which is ironic because France doesn't even use the franc anymore, but they've still got what 14 countries in Africa using their franc and processing their financials through Paris, which means their banks are getting a cut off of everything because that's how banks work. As you know, Jimmy, banks live off the fees.
Absolutely. Well, they're going to definitely bring up Mali soon and also Libya as well. So we don't even want to get started on Libya. So France's political counselor, Isis Giroud Darnault, echoed Mills, saying the model used by Wagner mercenaries has proven totally ineffective. He cited the nefarious and devastating impacts. So Britain's deputy UN ambassador, James Kariuki, cited the deterioration of security, especially in Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and the Lake Chad basin. And the fear of instability spreading to West African coastal countries. You cannot ignore the destabilizing role the Wagner Group plays in the region. They are part of the problem, not the solution, he told the council. Russia's deputy UN ambassador, Anna, rejected attempts to besmirch Russian assistance to Mali, where Moscow has a bilateral agreement to assist the transitional government, and in other countries in Africa. Some countries once again today declared that Russia apparently is pillaging and looting the resources of Africa and is facilitating the growth of the terrorist threat, she said, accusing those unnamed nations of doing the same thing throughout the world and in Africa, which she is correct, especially in neighboring Libya, which destabilized the entire area. So this is where she's, I believe she's blaming Libya on America, which she's kind of absolutely right. I mean, there is the infamous Hillary Clinton interview where she said, we came, we saw, he died, and she laughed. So that was about Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, after they brutally murdered him. So accusations against Russia are just astonishing given common sense. And undermine African leaders trying to resolve their own problems and decide who they want to cooperate with, which is what Russia is pretty much saying, that they want African countries to resolve their own problems without any kind of intervention, which obviously, as we know, America and European countries really love colonialism and intervening and cooing into other countries. So
I just find it interesting, if this is such a Russian group of Russian mercenaries, why isn't it called the Wagnersky group? Why is it Wagner? Because I'm going to say, if you just do a little bit of scratching behind Wagner Group, it's probably a multinational mercenary group, and its mercenaries are made up of foreign nationals from all around the world. And so, nobody has more mercenaries in the field than the United States. Eric Prince, Blackwater got famous for that. They rebranded as Khaki. There's Academy, there's Z, there's Triple Canopy. I mean, when the water protectors at the Standing Rock Sioux Indian Reservation were protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline, it was mercenaries that were using fire hoses and dogs and drones and everything else against my fellow water protectors at Ochetisacoin. And they're on the banks of the Missouri River. So, this is really, really rich that the AP is still going full Rachel Maddow, McCarthyism 2.0. It's Russians that are digging potholes in your local streets. It's Russians that are causing inflation. Yeah, whatever.
Yep. I mean, this is all still a continuation of the Cold War, so the Red Scare. So Giovanni, the deputy head of the UN Office for West Africa and the Sahel, told the council that insecurity has again deteriorated in large parts of the region due to activities of armed groups, violent extremists, and criminal networks. As a result, she said more than 10,000 schools across the Sahel have been closed, leaving millions of children without an education. Nearly 7,000 health centers have shut down. Armed groups are fighting for supremacy and control of resources, she said, and the Central Sahel is facing unprecedented levels of security and humanitarian challenges. Sociopolitical instability, further compounded by the impact of climate change, and food insecurity, which was exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine. She added that increasing attacks in countries along the Gulf of Guinea are threatening transport arteries to landlocked countries further north. So this just sounds like things that are outside of these countries' control, white people problems that are being affected by it. I don't see how it's only Russia's fault, but you got to leave it up to.
It's also stunning to me, considering how much actual fighting is happening on the ground right now with U.S. troops that were redeployed to Somalia by Biden, reversing a decision that was made by Bill Clinton after the Black Hawk was shot down over Mogadishu. Hence the Hollywood movie Black Hawk Down was made, glorifying that scene. And since that had happened, we had largely pulled out of the Horn of Africa, and we reoccupied Somalia just recently under Biden's order. And Somalia had gotten famous for being a new home of global piracy on the open seas, with pictures of Somali pirates paddling or taking speedboats out and pirating these ships. But it was met with an international military response and was largely crushed. So, obviously our involvement in Somalia right now as we speak has nothing to do with Somali piracy and everything to do with the unrest. It's called Al-Shabaab is what they call it. And you've also got fighting in Eritrea and Ethiopia and in South Sudan and in Chad. These are all right in the eastern part of the Sahel. They're talking about the Sahel when they talk about Mali and Burkina Faso and Central African Republic. And yet they don't mention where all of this ongoing combat with U.S. boots on the ground is happening. No mention of that in this article whatsoever. And again, there's not been made mention of any actual Russian military deployment to any of these areas. Now, Russia has a military presence in Djibouti at Camp Lemonnier. The Chinese have a military base at Camp across from Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti as well. U.S. AFRICOM, that's African Military Command of the United States, it's based in Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti as well. And that's where the Sahel meets the Red Sea on the other side of Africa. And then now look at the Gulf of Guinea, which is that nook of Africa where Africa goes from being big at the top and then skinny in the middle, where it skinnies down on its western Atlantic coast. You have the Ivory Coast and then the Gulf of Guinea. That is the current international center of piracy. Now that's the most dangerous seas to take your vessel through, to take a motor vehicle through, is the Gulf of Guinea, around Equatorial Guinea and Bissau, Nigeria, Lagos, Burkina Faso, right in that area there. And of course, that's also where the French oil company Total continues to build offshore oil drilling platforms. They're also doing loads of fracking and oil drilling and pipeline building all across the Sahel. And that's why they have these heavily armed UN thugs. I mean peacekeepers.
Right.
To make sure the work gets done.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, you're even on point talking about the right places. So, let me read this part. Russia's Anna said that Moscow shares the same concerns that America does about increasing terrorist threats in the region, ongoing interethnic and intercommunal conflict, organized crime, drug trafficking, and killing of a large number of civilians by fighters in the second half of 2022. She pointed to the withdrawal of French counterterrorism forces and the Takuba European Military Task Force under their command on June 30th, saying it wasn't agreed on with Mali's transitional government and is having a negative impact on the security situation in the short term. See, so this is some French is also doing things as well. Nonetheless, she said there is already some progress and Russia is providing Mali with appropriate assistance. Mills, the U.S. Deputy Ambassador, said that the United States is deeply concerned at the security, humanitarian, and political crisis in the Sahel that are causing a dramatic increase in the strength and influence of violent extremism. Those vague words to make people scared. The problem requires a democratic governance solution. There's another big word that they say.
Boy, word salad.
Yeah.
Can I have that with French dressing, please? French dressing, please.
Right. He also said, we are gravely concerned about democratic backsliding across the region and urge the return of democratically elected civilian-led governments. Whew, here we go. democracy, Captain Save a Democracy. West Africa's latest wave of coups kicked off in Mali in 2020, followed by another in Guinea in 2021, and then in Burkina Faso in January 2022. Do you know anything about those?
Yeah. Again, we're talking about the area between Libya and the Gulf of Guinea. And it's an area particularly rich in rare earth minerals like cobalt and lithium, which are essential to battery production, which is really the technological issue of our day when it comes to battery. Everything we use uses batteries: cell phones, laptops, even cars, right? You name it. And then there's also the new oil pipelines that are being built, because if they can complete these pipelines from the Gulf of Guinea across Africa, across Burkina Faso and Mali, and through Libya, it gets it all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, where they can then just easily get it to Europe, and they don't have to worry about the piracy and sailing around the pirate coast through the Gulf and around the Cote d'Ivoire. I'm sorry, Ivory Coast. Cote d'Ivoire is the name of the country. That's just French for Ivory Coast. Senegal, and then up around Morocco. And so it's interesting. We're overseeing the construction of a trans-Syrian pipeline right now through the northern part of Syria. That's the United States, that is, where we still, the U.S. Military is still illegally occupying the northern third of Syria to oversee the building of that pipeline. The Takuba group, which is led by the Légionnaires Étrangers, the French Foreign Legion, they're the ones that are basically the security detail for Total, which is the French oil company building the pipeline. Because ultimately, this all comes down, I swear, even Ukraine, don't all of these stories basically come down to like dirty fossil fuels and billionaires fighting over who gets to make the money off the dirty energy? And I don't know. I just see a repeating.
Yep.
There's a
Absolutely.
repeating thing. There's a trend going on here, sister.
Absolutely is. That's what I was. That's what I was starting to see when I was going through all this. The president of West African Regional Group, the ECOWAS Commission, told the council he was pleased to report that transitions to critical elections in the three countries are on course, with voting to take place in the next 2 years. So this is all that AP would give about this situation. It just seems like the U.S. and France are blaming Russia for doing something that they've actually been doing ourselves.
I can't believe they put that last word in there. And the official assures us that things are on course. How did they phrase it there at the end?
Yes.
Omar Aliou Touré, president of the West African Regional Group. Oh, is that like WEF? ECOWAS? ECOWAS Commission told the council he was pleased to report that transitions to critical elections in the three countries are on course. Like, wow, literally bragging about managing these countries. Because just a quick reminder to folks, there was literally a cigar smoke filled room led by the de Rothschilds in Europe. This was at the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles in Paris, France. And after having seen the French Empire and British Empire and Spanish Empire and Portuguese Empire lock horns and fight over territory, when it came to Africa's unspoiled riches, they decided to act like gentlemen and to divvy up the country like gentlemen should. So they literally sat down at a table like a bunch of fucking gangsters and said, okay, Cecil Rhodes, you'll get South Africa and apartheid East Africa, and and then France, you'll get this, and Italy, you get this, and Belgium, you get the Congo, and they literally, from Paris, France, drew the map for all of Africa, and then all the empires descended at the same time and made their colonies, unbeknownst to the Zulus and Swahilis and Wolof and Igbo and all the Kikongo and all the other tribes who were just blessed with brand new railroads and brand new mines. Because the tracks always lead from the mine to the tipple to the port, so that all that money can be extracted. And then they build whorehouses and gambling houses, and they just enslave the tribes into sex and drugs and money. Yay! Or Western civilization. I'm sorry, they're being developed.
Yeah.
Develop it.
Yes. Capitalism, democracy, liberation. All right. So we've got your song that goes with what we're just talking about. So go ahead and talk about this one a little bit.
So yes, this is the restored, rejuvenated video from Brussels. And so King Leopold of Belgium went in. He was really the last to the fight, because when we think of empires, Belgian, like Belgian waffle. So the Belgian Empire. How many times have you ever put those two words together in your head? Belgian Empire. Right. That my point exactly. So kind of late to the game, but this was in Paris, and Brussels is a short train right away. So, hey, come on, guys. We want in on this fun too. They're like, well, there's kind of this middle no man's land in the middle that everybody that goes there just dies of disease or is killed or whatever. And nobody really wants it. It's just the Congo. So it's mine? I can have it? Yay! So in go the Belgians. And now, of course, Belgium is not just French speaking. There's also a language called Flemish. And interestingly enough, when you speak Flemish properly, you will produce a lot of phlegm. I'm not sure if that's why they call it Flemish, but there's a lot of and the vowel, 2 and 3 vowels. Like, what's your word for ant? Aunt. A-A-A-A-A-N-T. Aunt. Oh, ant. No, it's aunt. Yeah. Anyways, Flemish, different language, like Dutch. Okay. So more like English a little bit, but different. It's different. Anyways, Belgium is not just a homogenous French-speaking country. There's even German speakers over in the eastern part there by Liège, or Loich, as they say. So, due to African conquest, and so this is like 1907, 1910. So this is like literally just a little over 100 years ago. And so they went in flying with steam engines and bulldozers and everything. It's amazing, because this is kind of one of the last gasps of just raw, unbridled imperialism, the same as Christopher Columbus, except that we've got these super duper European artsy people out there making videos and doing paintings and making Belgian waffles and croissants, and they're so cultured as they, conquer these tribes and make all the girls into prostitutes and make all the men into slaves. And get them to build railroads so that they can then immediately put them to work in mining and everything. And the most disturbing thing, as you watch this video, this is the only other video I've ever made that has Portuguese in it. So don't get the wrong idea that I'm much on. I actually don't speak much Portuguese myself, and Out of over 1,200 songs I've ever made, today's episode features the only 2 I ever made that were Portuguese. It just worked out that way. Didn't mean
So
to talk
cool.
about food either, but loves me some food.
That's right.
So at the toward the end of this video, you'll notice when you see the males who are basically like slave carriers. That's not the word. Porters, right? They're carrying stuff on their shoulder. They're porters, right? And they're porting stuff like bags of corn and coffee beans and whatever on each shoulder and packing it over to the train cars, the big rectangle box cars.
Right.
There we go. Found the word. Box. The porters are taking the beans and the corn to the box cars. And it's heavy, and they're struggling. And these are big guys. I mean, look like Dikembe Mutombo, Dikembe Mutombo, NBA player from the Congo, of course. Used to be called Zaire. Then you see the girls and the women, and they like have these baskets, and some of them are carrying stuff on their head like the Chiquita fruit lady, but they are hauling ass. They are running as fast as they can. And just before that scene, if you're paying attention to the video, there's actually a really slow pan. Well, I had to slow down the video. It took me 3 days to make this video after all the editing. But I slowed down the pan enough to where you could see, because I noticed it when it was in the actual video, it was playing 12 times faster than it is, because I just saw it in a snip. It was a scan of like a traditional Kikongo tribal village, and it showed one of the workers sitting on a stump chair type thing under like a tiki hut type pavilion type central plaza building, and his entire back is just a series of huge scar tissues from just absolutely being whipped to death. The only other time I've seen someone's back like that is from like pictures in the South, like daguerreau types, tin types that were taken in the Civil War at the end of plantation slavery in like, Mississippi cotton field or something, right? So anyways, I hope I didn't talk it out too much, but this is an absolute gem that I found of a time capsule where the video literally tells the story of colonialism in Africa, and it's still happening today, led by France and the United States, not by some Russian Wagner group. Wow,
Right.
that's really something.
Right. No, I agree. All
Thanks
right,
so much for bringing up that story.
Yeah, of course. We're not done yet. Hold on.
This is Kikongo, by the way. Kikongo, tribal language.
Tuvano dia kwetu walungukialo otuloloko masumometo endolokanga atantweto otufidiko unamuntu kumuni otuvuluza munabi kadi kyakwe kintimu engolo yonkembo yakwelembo ingeri.
You can always tell the Belgians because they have the white hat. Cocoa beans. The indigenous employed in their work.
Wow.
I don't see any shoes.
Nope.
Oh my God, if you look closely, you'll see these train cars are being pushed by tiny children. Look at this next train car, you'll see it looks like a 8-year-old that is pushing the train car.
It is. It's just like kids. Wow.
Wow. Oh my God. Terrible.
Wow.
Civilization. Wow, look at those wild pigs. I think we're about to see. There it is. There's the guy with the scars on his back. Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to slow this down so you could see it.
Oh my gosh. These poor guys.
I mean, it's all over his back where he's just been literally whipped to death. Jesus Christ. I couldn't imagine.
Jeez. Right.
Absolute barbarity.
Yep.
Wow. Commercial post of the colonization. Oh my God, that's what we literally called it. Commercial post of the colonization. The old bridge over the Libreezy. I should really go back through this video and put in English subtitles to the French there. Not everyone speaks much.
Right.
Bridge constructed by the Belgian engineers with their expertise. Okay, this is the other scene I was talking about. You'll see the women and the children go running by super fast while the porters are taking stuff over to the boxcars. They are hauling ass because all their baskets are empty. So I guess whenever they empty the basket, they got to run as fast as they can or they get whipped.
Right.
And those are all women. I had to edit a lot of this footage out of the women because I figured there were too many perverts who would just watch the video to see the gratuitous
Right.
upper body nudity. Anyway, they are out there.
They are.
Yeah, when I watched that film, it was over an hour and 15 minutes long. And there was like, I just kept taking notes. I'm like, whoa. Okay, I got to clip out that part with the kid pushing the train car. I got to get that in there. And then I got to get the part with the scars on the back. Anyway.
Yep.
Ooh. That video literally gives me goosebumps. It's just ooh.
Yeah,
Ooh.
just to
There's
see
nothing
the
like,
colonization of those people and how much they didn't like it.
and of course that's a lot of the Afro-Brazilian community is from the Congo. There was a Congo chief who actually defeated the Portuguese in battle so terribly that he was allowed to sail to Brazil and repatriate thousands of Congolese back to the Congo. But when we look at the Congo today, the Congo is still split up between four countries: Gabon, Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Angola. And of course, Angola is Portuguese, DRC is French or Belgian. So you got Portugal, Belgium, France, and the United States in there, and Gabon, as well as what's the other one? Monrovia is the capital. It's the where we actually sent African Americans back to this country in Africa. And Monrovia, named after James Monroe, is the capital. But the name of the country is escaping me now. Was it Sierra Leone? Maybe. Let me check.
Okay.
It's Monrovia. It's hard to keep. I mean, I used to know all the countries and capitals in Africa off the tip of my tongue.
Right.
But they changed. Not Sierra Mist, Sierra Leone. Why? Country in West Africa, Sierra Leone. Freetown. That's it. Freetown, Sierra Leone. Yep. Liberia. Liberia is the one I was thinking of.
Okay.
Is Liberia Monrovia? Yes. Liberia Monrovia, which is next to Sierra Leone, Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, and Burkina Faso. So, yeah, in the area you're just talking about there in Africa. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. So I wanted to, for the last little bit, talk about, since we're talking about colonization and, you know, all the stuff that Americans are doing and other countries, European, Western countries are doing to other countries, I kind of wanted to show what happens to a country when they're kind of past the point of accepting capitalistic, democratic things that are, you know, structures and processes and culture. So, kind of switching it up a little bit and going to, like I said, something that a country that's kind of way already past the point of no return to where we can't take this back anymore is what's going on in Ukraine. What is happening now that, you know, they've allowed this kind of proxy war, this bombing back and forth. You know, the people of Ukraine are going to have to rebuild. And so who does, you know, Zelensky, their leader, pretty much their owner, decided who they want to rebuild with, and it is BlackRock. If you guys don't know, BlackRock CEO is Larry Fink. He is a guy who pretty much has dipped his toes and invested in everything you can think of in this entire world. So he pretty much like has an ownership in everything. So this is kind of what happens, like, you know, just seeing what's happening right now with this whole thing is kind of what, if we allow America to keep doing this to other countries, this is what's going to happen to African countries, even Middle Eastern countries. You know, we're already seeing it happen in, you know, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, things like that. So, you know, this is what is to happen. We're seeing this stuff in real time, the pre-plan of it, but by what we're seeing in Africa.
It kind of seems like an acknowledgement of a fait accompli. It's an act already done. Basically, that Larry Fink, aka BlackRock CEO, is acknowledging that Ukraine is the single largest illegal money laundering operation on planet Earth right now. And so when it comes to washing your money away, there's no better an investment vehicle for legitimizing illegitimate gains than to wash it through Ukraine investments, just as they were doing for 20 years in Afghanistan. I mean, that's something that Julian Assange pointed out, that, the last time the American people were really holding the government's feet to the fire about how much money was missing at the Pentagon was on September the 10th, 2001, when Rumsfeld said, blithely out of the side of his mouth, well, there's $2.1 trillion that we can't account for, but we're looking into it. And then literally the next morning, the next day was 911. Right. And so since that time, we've only seen countless more trillions of dollars disappear into a black hole that can now be called BlackRock Investments.
Right. Well, the Pentagon has been, I think, failing every audit for the last 5 years, and just recently failed their last one in the last couple of weeks. So they continue to fail them. But yeah, so this is pretty much what happens when America ends up dipping their toes into other countries. I don't want to get too much into this because I got some good videos about Larry Fink and who he is. So yeah, BlackRock CEO.
Why does every picture of Zelensky make Zelensky look like he's high on cocaine?
I always see him as like this, how they try to portray him as like the military dude, the guy that's in the barracks with the guys with his green military shirt. That's like some Gucci shirt that's probably $2,000, just an army green color. That's what I see.
I always picture Zelensky at that wedding with Britney Spears and Kevin Federline, where they were wearing the jogging suits, and one said, sexy bitch or something? Or
I think so. It's been a long time.
And Kevin Federline and all his groomsmen had the blue sweats. But of course, Zelensky would be in his green sweats and tracksuit. Anyways, go ahead.
Absolutely. So Larry Fink and Zelensky agreed to coordinate investment efforts to reconstruct Ukraine during a video conference this week. Zelensky's office made the announcement on Wednesday. It came after Ukraine's economic ministry signed a memorandum of understanding in November for BlackRock to provide advisory support for designing an investment framework. Interesting. So they needed Larry Fink's help for an investment framework for a way for other countries or other private corporations to invest in his country. So he's definitely turning it into a mini America. Like I said, this country is definitely past the point of no return when it comes to being westernized. So Zelensky and Fink agreed to focus on in the near term on coordinating efforts of all potential investors and participants in the reconstruction of the country, channeling investments into the most relevant and impactful sectors of the Ukraine economy. Zelensky previously spoke with Fink in September, and Kiev also indicated some BlackRock leaders will visit Ukraine next year. BlackRock spokesman Mark Bubek deferred comment to the company's announcement of the memorandum. Russia's invasion entered its 11th month. Ukraine has suffered widespread damages. Kiev schools of economics in November estimated damages about a little over $135 billion. So this is pretty much just, they're obviously it's the Hill, so I'm pretty sure they're going to be a little bit biased. So it's very like pro, this is what's happening. So I found
that article was written in 2022. So when they talked about visiting next year, they were talking about something literally a few days away.
Right.
As
absolutely.
in now, like between now and February, more
or less. Yeah.
The Ukraine is an investment bonanza for illegal money laundering. The Ukraine is a laboratory bonanza when it comes to playing with gain of function and chemical biological weapons facilities, as we now know, as was admitted under oath to Congress by Victoria Nuland, the same one who we had on secret recording talking during the Maidan coup when Viktor Yanukovych, the elected Ukrainian president, was overthrown and replaced by Petro Poroshenko, the corrupt Ukrainian oligarch, and Victoria Nuland at the United States State Department with on the recording, talking about Yachts is our guy. We've got this all under wraps. I mean, literally showing how, John McCain and other Americans were, playing hacky sack and sharing sandwiches with Nazi tattoos and everything. I mean,
Yep.
I'm talking about like 2013 and 2014 when this all began. And these extremists in Kiev began to just openly attack and shell Russian minorities in the Donbass. And again, now for over 8 years, nearly 9 years now, these maniacs, U.S.-supported maniacs in Kiev, have literally fought peace at every possible turn, rejecting the Minsk Accords, rejecting every single attempt to broker a peace. Peace is not an option. And now it's gotten to the point over the Christmas holidays, the Ukraine was, destroying churches, going into convents and monasteries, arresting monks and nuns.
Wow.
What Ukraine has been doing, actually worse, if you can even imagine, worse than what the U.S. trained death squads were doing in El Salvador and Guatemala. Right sector and Azov battalion, even worse.
Right.
You can't really out Nazi a Nazi, especially when they're full blown fucking Nazis.
Right. But companies love to invest in those kind of things. That's why America's so powerful. So
Ooh, this is going to be good. Ooh, you
yes.
got a good one, don't you, Jimmy?
Yes. So we're taking it. So obviously we just read The Hill. They made it sound like this was just something recent that they've only been talking about for a little bit. But actually, I found this. This was released 9 months ago. Larry Fink, CEO, had released his annual shareholder letter. So he is the head of the world's largest asset manager, and he discussed market, the Russia-Ukraine war, and more. So here's a little snippet video of him talking about his letter to shareholders, which if anybody doesn't understand what shareholders are, they're pretty much the people that invest into his company as well, or they hold stock into his company. These are the people that the CEOs answer to. So when you think that, companies and CEOs need to answer to the workers because they're the ones that provide the product and the labor to keep the company going, that is absolutely not true. This is the reason why people do not make a lot of money in companies as normal employees, is because the CEO is not only pocketing a lot for himself, but giving money back to the shareholders. So here we go.
BlackRock's Larry Fink is out today with his letter to shareholders. The head of the world's largest asset manager starts his annual communication with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the impact that the war has had on markets around the world, specifically the rate of globalization. Here's what he writes. I remain a long-term believer in the benefits of globalization and the power of global capital markets. Access to global capital enables companies to fund growth, countries to increase economic development, and more people to experience financial well-being. Recent events and the swift sanctions Western economies have levied against Russia have shaken his approach somewhat. And Fink says this, too. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has put an end to the globalization that we have experienced over the last 3 decades.
Just take that little bit alone from Larry Fink and try to figure out what he's trying to tell the people with that. To me, it seems like the Russian invasion of Ukraine has put an end to the globalization we have experienced over the last 3 decades. So the last 30 years, you're talking about 1992 to right now. You're telling me that the Russia-Ukraine fiasco that's been going on for the last year has ended the kind of globalization that we've experienced over the last 3 decades. You got to be kidding me, right? This fear-mongering stuff is absolutely insane, and it already goes to show the Larry Fink's side that he's already starting to take of wanting to rebuild Ukraine for quote unquote globalization reasons.
Well, what
Access to
was
capital.
going on in Russia 30 years ago? 30 years ago, Bill and Hillary Clinton were basically running Russia. They handpicked and put the pathetic alcoholic Boris Yeltsin in charge of Russia. And he was such a complete and pathetic failure, the Russian deep state replaced him with one of their own spies, a spy who began his spy work working with the East German Stasi in East Berlin. And the East Berlin trained Russian spy is still running the Russian Federation on behalf of the Russian deep state. That is Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is basically the Russian version of George Herbert Bush, who ran the CIA and then literally tried to get his running mate, Ronald Reagan, assassinated while Reagan was president and he was vice president. He literally had dinner with the assassin's brother the night before the assassination attempt. And some would say that George H.W. Bush had a lot to do with the murder of John F. Kennedy in Dallas, considering he was running the CIA Dallas branch on November 22nd, 1963. But he's dead now, so whatever. But when you hear Vladimir Putin, think George Herbert Bush. 1,000 points of light. Read my lips. No new taxes. That one.
Right.
That Bush. Not
Yep.
W, the one you get high with. The daddy Bush.
Right.
Markets is a privilege, not a right. And following Russia's invasion, we saw how the private sector, quickly terminated longstanding business and investment relationships. And guys, I think that's what's incredibly interesting here. If Larry Fink is saying that globalization as we know it is coming to an end, that means something. We've talked about basically my entire professional career just being an expansion of globalization. We are watching this in a lot of different ways. Larry Fink talking about this, what we heard yesterday from Intel CEO when he's talking to Congress about making sure that we can shore up plants here in the United States. It really does seem like we are coming to the end. And you want to talk about backwardation. Right. This is backwardation when it comes to globalization.
Well, to me, see, this is like a next level of post-pandemic. We didn't know this was coming, but when everyone talked about resilience and what was happening with the supply chain then, and now it's sort of this whole issue has been elevated in a whole different way. So if you're Apple at this point, I think you have to have a real conversation about whether you want to be in China and how do you diversify at this point? Is there labor in other countries? Everybody thinks China is this sort of magical place where somehow you can surge labor when you need it to make the phones, but somehow this doesn't exist in other places. Does India benefit from this? Does Mexico benefit from this? Where do you do this? How do you do this?
Benefit. Do you hear that? India is going to be benefiting from this.
I got to say, Pee Wee Herman is asking some good questions there.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you do this, by the way, is it going to start to show up in the numbers? Meaning, huge capital costs trying to move some of these, or at least even duplicate.
The word of the day is democracy.
Cherry,
globalization. Those are globalization.
I miss Pee Wee's Playhouse.
And you have globalization and not have. Is there globalization ex Russia and potentially ex China, depending on their
it's Western versus
depending
Eastern.
on their behavior, on whether they can stay with it, and it remains to be seen. That it's possible.
But think about
they're getting into like the tit for tat stuff with that. I do have another video to show as well of Larry.
I just got one comment to push back against CNBC, the briefest Yona commentary ever. I'll believe that China is the enemy. I'll believe that it's East versus West. The split second that Family Dollar, Dollar Tree, Dollar General, Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, and the rest stop selling anything made in China. Back to you, sis.
That's right. They're never going to stop that. We need our Chinese products.
We need those big container ships coming across the Pacific to the port of Long Beach and the port of Los Angeles so they can be stacked one on top of the other like Lego bricks onto these 5-mile long trains pulled by overworked railroad workers who are not allowed to go on strike because President Poopy Pants said no. Back to work,
That's right.
slave.
That's right.
Greatest labor president ever, huh? 81 million votes. Right.
Yep. Okay, so this is it's called They Own Everything, the most powerful company in the world. So this guy right here with the glasses and looks like a thumb on the right is Larry Fink himself.
Used to BlackRock beating the numbers, beating expectations. That
BlackRock is by far the largest with roughly 35% market share of domestic market.
Who is the most powerful man in the world? Some may say it is the President of the United States. Others may side with corporate America and deem the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk to be more powerful. But there is someone else. It is likely you have never heard of BlackRock. In less than 30 years, this company has grown from nothing to becoming the world's largest asset manager. The assets in the roster exceed the value of $9 trillion, and their net worth is equal to half of America's GDP. Clearly, they do not need a name in the mainstream media to be successful, or, in fact, own and control the entire world. But who are they? What do they do? And how does this one company in America influence every industry and sector in the world? Let's begin with who they are. BlackRock was founded in 1988 by Larry Fink, along with Robert Capito, Susan Wagner, Barbara Novick, Ben Golub, Hugh Frater, Ralph Schlosstein, and Keith Anderson. Its aim was to provide corporations with asset management services to help them manage their risks and investments. The idea came when Fink, during his time in First Boston, lost $100 million as its head. That experience became the motivation for him to develop what he and the others considered to be excellent risk management and fiduciary practices. BlackRock first got its funding from Pete Peterson of the Blackstone Group, who believed in Fink's vision of a firm devoted to risk management. Fink's company then essentially became an arm of Blackstone, and it was called Blackstone Financial Management. In exchange for a 50% stake in the bond business, Blackstone gave Fink and his team a $5 million credit line. Within months, the business turned profitable. And by 1989, the group's assets had quadrupled to $2.7 billion. Blackstone's stake in Fink's company then fell to just 40%, as opposed to the 60% held by Fink and his group. The firm adopted the name BlackRock in 1992, and by the end of that year, BlackRock was managing $17 billion in assets. By the end of 1994, they were handling $53 billion. Sometime later that same year, Fink became the chairman and CEO of BlackRock Inc. The company went public in 1999 at just $14 a share on the New York Stock Exchange. And by the end of that year, they were handling $165 billion in assets. BlackRock grew both organically and by acquisitions. And in 2004, they made their first significant acquisition, buying State Street Research and Management's holding company, SSRM Holding Inc., from MetLife for $325 million in cash and $50 million in stock. And this was only the beginning. We are aware, to some extent, that a handful of mega corporations and private investment companies dominate every aspect of our lives. What we watch, eat, drink, wear, buy, and go is all dictated. It is all less of a personal choice and more what is fed to us by corporations. All of these investment firms are so enormous that they control the money flow worldwide. While there appear to be hundreds of competing brands on the market, the truth is, larger parent companies actually own multiple smaller brands, like Russian nesting dolls. PepsiCo, for example, owns a long list of food, beverage, and snack brands, as does Coca-Cola, Nestle, General Mills, Unilever, Mars, Kraft Heinz, and Associated British Foods. Together, these parent companies monopolize the packaged food industry, as virtually every food brand available belongs to one of them. These companies are publicly traded and are run by boards, where the largest shareholders have power over the decision-making. And here is where it gets interesting, because when you look up who the largest shareholders are, you find yet another monopoly. While the topmost shareholders can change from time to time based on shares bought and sold, two companies are consistently listed among the top institutional holders of these parent companies, the Vanguard Group Inc. and BlackRock Inc. The same ownership trend exists in industries besides food and beverage. If you're planning a family vacation, using your laptop, phone, or tablet to research ticket prices and hotel stay, your go-to would probably be a site like Skyscanner, Booking.com, Airbnb, or Expedia, which provides you with all the information you need in one convenient place. Well, both of these companies are owned by BlackRock. You book your vacation and are set to fly, most likely with American Airlines, Air France, KLM, United Airlines, Delta, or Transavia, all of which BlackRock has a stake in. Even if you are not flying with any of these airlines, BlackRock still owns a percentage of Boeing and Airbus, two of the largest aircraft manufacturers in the world. If you arrive at your hotel and choose to write a review of your stay on TripAdvisor, you would be using a service also partly owned by BlackRock, and their power goes much further. The kerosene that fuels the plane comes from one of their many oil companies and refineries, and the steel that makes the plane also comes from their mines. The agricultural sector is not exempt from this either. BlackRock owns Bayer, the world's largest seed producer, along with some of the largest textile manufacturing plants and clothing companies. In addition to that, BlackRock has a stake in solar panel producing companies, major drug companies, and the scientific institutes and labs that fund drug studies. Places where you shop, from malls and department stores to Amazon and AliExpress, are owned by BlackRock. If you choose not to shop with them, and support smaller local businesses, you are still supporting BlackRock when you use your credit card or any digital mode of payment to pay for your goods and services. Insurance companies, banks, construction companies, telephone companies, restaurants, personal care brands, and makeup brands are all in your sizable portfolio. In virtually every major company, you find BlackRock among the top 10 institutional investors. With its massive reach, BlackRock is essentially the fourth branch of government, influencing policies and decisions and even lending money to the central bank and Federal Reserve.
In past times of crisis, the Federal Reserve System has asked BlackRock for help managing funds.
But it's not abnormal for the Fed to be buying services from companies.
The 2008 financial crisis had the New York Federal Reserve leader Timothy Geithner ask BlackRock for help to manage the distressed assets Bear Stearns and AIG. In an echo of 2008, the Fed once again relied on BlackRock to stabilize the bond market amid the economic turmoil caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The details of the arrangement were not revealed, including how much BlackRock would be paid for their services, but it was undoubtedly a lucrative undertaking for the company.
Very interesting to find out, huh?
Oh, that's the secret.
Oh, God.
You know, I got to give a shout out to Spotify.com. You know, I never thought it would make such a difference to upload any music to Spotify. You know, I put out a lot of songs, but the one song that I've had that's gotten more play across the country is World War III Save Our Economy, which has 3 verses. And the third verse, World War III Save Our Plutocracy. BlackRock and Vanguard own the boulevard. Quarterly earnings from both sides, more cities burning and stock price rise. Battle lines are drawn and alliances are formed. Hills are taken and the beaches are stormed. That's my song. And so as a experiment, I paid the money to get the UPC code and the barcode and register as the copyright holder and everything. And I put it up onto Spotify, that song. And I actually have gotten emails asking about other songs or what album it's on and stuff. So pretty excited. But yeah, that BlackRock and Vanguard, you know, that's the killer punch in that whole damn song is when I get down to that third verse. World War III, Save Our Plutocracy. It's all about BlackRock and Vanguard. And you know, and I again don't mention them by name, but I'm talking about the same thing in the song Sevastopol, in the issue with Ukraine and Russia, because, you know, Sevastopol is the main city in the Crimean Peninsula, which has already been annexed by Russia back into the Russian Federation and taken from Ukraine. And it's interesting if you look at maps, because if you look at Chinese maps or Russian maps or Brazilian maps even, they show Crimea as part of Russia. But if you look at Google Maps or French Michelin maps, they show Crimea and the Donbass republics as still part of the Ukraine, still today. Because, you know, whose side are you on?
Right.
I'm on the side of the people that are being killed in the middle of this whole thing, as it's just a money laundering, money making scheme and a resources grab. What we're seeing in Africa, quite frankly, is the recolonization of Africa. And what we're seeing with BlackRock in the United States, particularly, is the recolonization of America. I mean, if I take the macro view across all the different tribes and all the different Indian reservations all across this country, we've all come to realize it's the same fight. We have to fight to protect the water, because water is life. And in the fight to recolonize this country, they have to make the water poison. And so they're literally deliberately going out of their way to poison the water in every deliberate way possible, whether you're talking hydrofluorosilicic acid and water fluoridation or other things, not to mention the glyphosate and agriculture runoff getting into streams, not to mention the pseudoestrogens, you know, like Alex Jones screams about making the frogs gay. There's, you know, and then you've got lead and Legionnaire's disease in the Flint River, right? Making people in Flint sick. You know, you had the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. Point being, to recolonize, to colonize in particular, you have to be able to restrict the daily necessities of life: water, food, clothing. So, you know, they conquered the Lakota by conquering the buffalo herds, almost completely exterminating the buffalo. They exterminated the eastern mountain buffalo. That species of buffalo is gone. And that's how they got rid of the Wyandotte, Guyandotte, Seneca, Shawnee, and others. I'm sorry, Shawnee, not Seneca. Just about wiped them out. And they just about wiped out our deer population here as well, because everything we traded in was valued in how many bucks it's worth. That's going to cost you $10. That's worth $5. You know, and I always point that out. Here it is, 2023. We're still saying bucks for dollars. And because everything, you know, a buckskin was something we could all agree upon was of value. So literally it was a deer skin backed economy because you literally wore deer skin on your back. But, you know, today we have this virtual economy where most people never touch cash in their daily lives now. And it's not so much of a conscious choice, really. It's just that they have made it so much easier with, you know, Apple Pay and other things where you don't even have to insert a card. You can just tap. Yep. And it'll debit off of your account, because we're living in the future time, folks. And very quickly, I think this year we're going to see the rollout where BlackRock can now finally manage each individual's financial life through the financial credit score, which is the basis. They have to have the financial credit score as the basis for doing the full social credit score. And as you know, well, there's already Transperian. There's already Equifax. You can already check what your financial credit score is. That's already a thing. We're already there. It's just a matter of now attaching it to everything. And of course, when it comes to credit card, it's already there. See, these are all foundational levels to building this skyscraper that is just basically a permanent prison for this artificial construct that is supposed to define who and what you are.
Right.
Well, you have this name from some guy that had a dick, and that's your name now.
Yeah.
And that's who you are. And you went to this school, so this is what you do.
Yeah.
And you live in this state, so this is what you are.
Yep.
No, that's not how humanity works. That's not how life happens. Life is an organic thing. Life is not a scripted thing, you know, but it's all about scripting to control people, you know, and, you know, just, you know, don't make trouble, and that's not polite talk and everything. And the truth is, patriarchy has had its run. We're now seeing patriarchy do what patriarchy always does, completely destroy itself. And so I just keep my fingers crossed that the prophets and elders of our tribe, as many other tribes like the Hopi have suggested with the rainbow prophecy of the rainbow tribe, that the time of renewal of this earth is about. Some say the end is near, but I see it the other way, Jimmy. It's wonderful. The beginning is near. And when you realize man is not the master of Mother Nature, the unruly child is not going to get the upper hand against Mother Nature. Mother Nature has been kind and patient. When Mother Nature has had enough of the ruling child, then again we will be reminded by Mother Nature just how powerful it is and how helpless we are with all of our technology. I had warned earlier on an earlier stream I did with you that I was very concerned that the hodgepodge network of flood walls and flood defenses and levees around the city of Sacramento are in terrible shape. And as soon as they are put to the test, you're going to see multiple levee failures. Rewind the tape. You've posted the clips. It's on Rockfin and YouTube. Go back, folks. Literally, I was saying this on this show some Wednesday many months ago. I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. And it gives me no great pleasure to see this. I think they're calling it an atmospheric river or something has just been dumping deluges of water
Yep.
on the Pacific coast from Humboldt County all the way down to San Diego County and all points in between, particularly in Sacramento. And of course, I think at last count, there was 14 failures of the levees. I mean, so the point being is, when Mother Nature has had enough of the unruly child, Mother Nature will take charge of the situation. I mean, it's all fun and games while the kids are jumping up and down on the bed, and then something goes crash on the ground like glass breaking, and mommy hears it, and mommy comes in the room. We're pretty much here at that day of reckoning where Mother Nature. I'm not worried about Mother Nature. I'm worried about humanity.
Right.
Mother Nature will survive. I don't know if humanity.
Yeah, that's what people always
We have to
ask
work
me too.
together.
They're like, "Are you afraid of the world ending? Like, what are you? Does it terrify you that the world ends?" I'm like, no, I don't think of the world as ending, because even if humans cease to exist, the world's going to continue. The Earth is going to continue, keep on keeping on. So
it is frightening for the patriarchy. It is frightening for the rich with the swinging dicks. To just even to their dystopia is to not have this digital credit score, to not have this digital panopticon surveillance, constant data mining of everyone's lives, to not be the nosy pervert peeping through everybody's shower, right? That's their dystopia. But for us, that's utopia. That's matriarchy, where there's enough for everyone.
Right.
Where we can share and live within an ecosystem. And it's not about owning anything. It's rather fulfilling your responsibilities to everyone else. Again, matriarchy is the complete antithesis of patriarchy. And so that's how I have always lived and still live in harmony with Earth. And this is complete disharmony. I mean, after all, when you go into the Sacramento Delta and build all these levees so that you can farm this floodland, well, then you get a really big flood, and the flood goes back into the floodland that you tried to keep the water out of, but it was called floodland for a reason.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, no, we've been hit pretty dang hard out here for the last, couple of weeks or so. And we're not even done yet. We're actually about to hit our third atmospheric river coming up this weekend. So it'll be number 3. And all these news, everything that I've watched about the local news around here, what they're doing is they're just, trying to clean up and prepare for the next one. That's all they can do, because they've never prepared for anything. These rivers, these little like aqueducts, they were, there was so dry for so long that there were people living in those things. The homeless people were living in there, and now, they're just upended, and people have died already. I think
But my
hit over
goodness,
20.
at this point, I don't understand how they're still doing rescues of people driving in flooded roads at this point. I mean, there honestly cannot be a single person alive in California that has not heard the phrase atmospheric river. I mean, unless you literally live in a cabin with unless you're totally off grid living in a cabin in the woods somewhere. How do you not know what the hell is going on now? This is not just a one storm, as you said. This is like one wave, second wave, third wave. They're talking about like there could be 5, 6, 7 waves. I mean, it's really, really, it's very dire when you look at the overall trend for the next weeks. And because
and it's only in like
because
certain
one problem
areas too.
compounds the other. See, the same areas that have these forest fires. The forest fires leave what's called burn scars on the slopes. And so you have all the fallen timber and everything that's just laying on the slope. And the trees are dead, so the roots aren't holding in the slope or anything. Then to add insult to injury, then we get these super rainstorms, and where they hit these watersheds that have the large burn scars. Now you have these bad catastrophic landslides, and you have all this debris that gets washed out. So it's not just water, but like tree trunks and timber and everything from the burn scars getting washed out, plus any trash. It's just one disaster feeds the other, is what I'm saying.
Yep, absolutely does. And it's crazy is like a lot of people I've been watching on the news, they've been saying like, thank you, Caltrans for helping and stuff. And it's like, yeah, Caltrans is helping in a lot of areas, but there's like places that they're lacking in other areas. I mean, just I live in the San Bernardino Mountains. We're not getting hit as hard as Sacramento up north more, but we're still getting hit really hard, and we're getting a lot of flooding, a lot of snow, unexpected snow. And Caltrans is just like nowhere to be seen out here. My husband works for Caltrans, and they can't find any workers out there to help people to make sure they're putting on their snow chains. We've had more people just in the last 2 weeks alone pass away from sliding off of the side of the off the road, off the side of the mountain onto like a 200 to 400-foot cliff and pass away just in the last 2 weeks alone than we've ever had in the entire, I think, 9 years that I've lived in this area. So it's just wild to me, the unpreparedness of of the people out here in California, when we should have been preparing for stuff like this. But there goes.
You made the comment earlier in the broadcast. You said earlier, Jimmy, that it's like people have amnesia, just collective amnesia. Like we can't remember things in this country that just happened 2 or 4 years ago. And so, I think it's most noticeable when it comes to these major natural disasters, whether we're talking hurricanes in Florida and Texas, or major landslides and catastrophic flooding in California, because this has happened in California before. But again, depending on what part of California you're in, whether you're in, San Bernardino or San Joaquin Valley or NorCal, it depends on how this is affecting you so far. But the point being, this has happened before, but particularly for younger generations, it kind of dodged a bullet. I mean, it's the same thing with dare I mention the E word when I'm talking about LA, but I mean, Northridge was in 94. And that's now what? Almost 30 years ago.
Yep.
And that's the last time. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about it. That really freaks me out. I really don't want to see a repeat of 1904 San Francisco with a 9 point whatever. Oh my God.
Right. I think we've only had one since then. We've had
picture every single freeway interchange just falling down,
Yeah. Yeah. No, we had one recently, I think in the last couple of years, where it was like a 6.7, but it was in a desert town, very small. So it was not as much damage as what you would see in a city, but we still get some out here pretty
closer to the Salton Sea.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That last one I think was closer to the Salton Sea.
Which that place is really sad too. But yeah, you're right.
Footage is just amazing from California. Stunning footage. Unbelievable destruction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy what has happened.
And it's not even done yet. I mean,
yeah.
Is it going to be another week? Is it going to be another 2 weeks of these over and over and over again? I mean, it's going to get to a point where Caltrans is going to be like, we're just going to wait this thing out until it's done. And then we're going to go back and replace culverts and relay top. And because I'm seeing washout after washout. And
yep.
The other thing is, there's a lot of snow being dropped on California right now. A lot of snow. And so they're talking like there's supposed to be the super duper warm up, a freakishly hot spell coming in the middle of February. So I'm thinking that's probably going to be the end of the atmospheric rivers. So God forbid we just keep getting dumped and dumped, because in California your precipitation depends on your elevation. Lower elevations get just water. Higher elevations get snow, and in betweens get the dreaded mix of ice and other just nasty slush and And so what happens is in those upper elevations where like if you get 3, 4, 5 waves of snow, you're gonna get all this snowpack. And then if you get a super duper hot spell come through, all that shit's gonna melt, and it will actually cause a worse flash flood than the raining does. For some reason, catastrophic snow melt is the worst flooding.
Right.
Because it has nothing to do with precipitation, and the water's coming from everywhere equally as it all melts. It's frightening, really.
Yep. Well, Nestle out here will take it. But Nestle will love to take all that. So don't worry. I'm pretty sure they got pipes out there in Big Bear, ready to suck
Nestle
up
already
that
is
water.
taking a lot of water from California for very little money.
Oh yeah. I've been fighting Nestle for quite a few years now. We actually were fighting them a couple of years back, trying to get our area to stop selling it to Nestle because they were selling. Nestle was buying the water for 0.00001 cents per gallon, but they were doing it on an expired license that had expired in 1986. So I was like a year old when their license expired, and they couldn't renew their license this entire time. But they never felt like renewing it or anything. But as soon as we fought them, they got their license renewed, and now they're allowed to do it again.
It was a fait accompli, and they got it through. The same thing happened when Rick Snyder, Republican, was governor of Michigan, and he cut a deal with Nestle that was supposed to be the replacement for Detroit and Flint water system. And instead, Rick Snyder put in an emergency law where he alone could appoint financial managers to overrule the elected city and county governments locally. And so he sent a financial manager down to run the city of Flint, Michigan, who in turn then took Flint off of the Detroit city water system and put them back onto the highly polluted Flint River, rather than using the crystal clear geyser water that is being sold to Nestle just 40 miles north of Flint. But again, that was Rick Snyder's deal. Well, now they thought that when Gretchen Whitmer got in, that Rick Snyder would be held to account and everything. But first thing Gretchen Whitmer did was basically pardon and kill all the investigations and clean it all up. And then work with the FBI to talk about how she's been the victim of 2 different alleged attempts on her life and kidnappings when they were all planned and orchestrated by the FBI entirely, start to finish. And then when she was running for governor here recently, she had her political opponent, the Republican Greg Kelly, put in jail the day before the election because he had attended a rally in Washington, D.C. hours before the so-called insurrection, although he was not at the Capitol. But just being at the rally earlier that day was enough to get him arrested by the FBI. Again, things happening in the United States that used to happen just like in Nicaragua and Guatemala and stuff now. But now we have literally become a caricature of ourselves, imperially speaking. And we are now basically a banana republic that's being recolonized by Larry Fink and BlackRock, as BlackRock is laying more pipelines across the country and keeping the railroad system basically in a chokehold. Because, the reason why Biden forbid the rail workers from striking is because BlackRock and all the corporations that are registered in Delaware, where Biden's from, they own and control Biden. He is their puppet. And they own and control the 5 major Class 1 railroads in the country, along with, Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett, which is, again, basically an appendage of Vanguard BlackRock. So you're talking Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, Union Pacific, Norfolk Southern, CSX, Kansas City Southern, all the major railroads from coast to coast. It didn't used to be that way. But, you know, now we have so many monopolies, and no more so is there a monopoly than the news and information. So like the clips that you've shared today from AP, from The Hill, from Breitbart, those are all mainstream, and they all have their own biases. But I did notice at the beginning of the show you played Nadana Toscana, which is Cherokee for free thinker, your Cherokee name, because I feel like you're able to go through all these different clips and get to the actual pearls of fact and sift through the bias. Some of the bias is apparent, and the other bias is a little bit more ubiquitous. So that's where I come in to pitch about it.
That's right. That's what I need. All right. So we've got about 8 minutes left. So you got anything going on this week?
Well, I think sometime today, maybe while I've been on the air, my YouTube channel is now back for business, so I can now upload on YouTube after a week strike. I just keep getting these DCMAs and strikes and everything.
Yep.
I want to apologize for being so absolutely tired. They worked me to death on New Year's Eve, and after about 10-hour shift, you know, I was all stoked when it hit midnight at Eastern time, because I mean, you know, we talked about it, and Warren and all of us had plans and anything. I don't really want to go over all that. It's kind of still stings. Still stings and stinks. Both G and K. Stings and stinks.
Yep.
I just want to apologize for passing out, but I mean, as it turns out, it just went from bad to worse later that night. But nonetheless, here we are, still rising stars.
Exactly.
Still doing our thing. So
exactly.
Lovers gonna love, haters gonna hate. What can I say?
Exactly. Exactly. So nothing planned for this week. You got a show coming up on Friday.
I've got my show Friday night, and of course I've dropped 4 complete albums. I put them together as music video albums on Run First, and now begins the more laborious task of going to Bandcamp and SoundCloud and uploading the album as a playthrough, and then each track individually as a WAV file. Now, of course, when it comes to the music videos, with all the problems with music videos on YouTube and YouTube channels being yeeted and videos being censored, that's why I had to put it on Rumble, and I'm also going to put it on my Odyssey and DLive and BitChute and Venmo and other places. The video form of the album, where you can put up, you know, album after album and watch an hour solid of music videos, like the old days of MTV, you know, but they're Yona videos. And so I put out the first 4 of what's to be 8 albums. We'll see if between today and this weekend, if I can get the next 4 out. So I'm trying to set all new records here. 8 albums in less than 4 days. Can it be done? Well, I've already put 4 albums out over 4 hours. There's the dance mixtape, Gotham Boogie, the indie mixtape, Mud Cardboard, the acoustic mixtape, Totem So, and the rap mixtape, Saliva. And so a little bit of everything out there, different musical styles and stuff. And of course, some of those songs we've played here on the KRTDs.
Yep. I'm putting the links in the comment section right now so everybody can go to them. All right, there we go.
I got 12, 13, 14, and 19 up, and now I just have to get 15, 16, 17, and 18. But I put the album 19 is the first one that I put out, Gotham Boogie, and that because I put the last album slated out first because it was my favorite. Because it's all the dancing stuff, just dance the whole time. And I actually, for that one, I went back into the digital audio workstation and DJ'd and mixed the entire album together, so it's a continuous play, like you would listen to like on a stream. Whereas the other 3 albums, it's actual each song, and then it stops and there's silence, and then next song, you know. But that's it. That's pretty much it. If you want to send money my way, if you feel so inclined, it's the Cash App, Yona Aniwodi, just my first and last name. Same thing with PayPal. Yeah. And pretty much the same thing. But more than anything, the best way you can support me is to support yourself and realize your own potential, your own intelligence, trust your gut instincts, follow more of your own advice, give yourself more of your own advice. It's the best advice out there, trust me.
Absolutely, I agree. Here, I'm going to put your Twitter in here as well, so people can find you on Twitter as well. There we go. Okay. So for us at KRTD Media, I'm trying to find if we have anything going. It doesn't look like we've got anything going on today. Oh, wait. Yes, we do. Okay. So coming up in 1 hour, it looks like we have, let me see what the name of this is. Patrick Lovell's Truth Bombs, The American Dream is Dead. What are you going to do about it? That sounds pretty awesome.
Patrick has some good truth bombs to throw out there. Shout out Patrick. And I caught that stream last night too, along with the music intermission.
Oh, good.
With the stream last night. That was pretty good stuff. Shane,
yeah.
Joe, and singing in the middle there. Takes a lot of guts. And he was having some trouble with his phone and stuff. And like a real trooper, like a true professional, he powered through. That takes... Trust me, I've been on stage before and had things go wrong. And, you know, even like, you know, Warren, when things were kind of, you know, you guys kept it going, still had fun, still had a good stream. You know, we made the best of it.
Yep.
You know,
that's what he tries to do.
Shit happens and you make the best of it.
Exactly.
Life gives you lemons, add vodka.
Add vodka. That's right. Damn straight.
Lemonades for pussies.
Right. Exactly. So keep an eye out for that. I'll probably maybe throw out a couple of clips today if I can find the time to do it. I will be back on tomorrow. I am not seeing anyone that's got anything else scheduled for today other than that. So you know what I'll tell everybody to do is keep an eye out for Warren's Twitter. He always throws out all the live streams that are happening at the moment. And
when's Warren coming back?
Whenever he wants. He usually just lets me know last minute, like, you want somebody? I'm like, fuck yeah,
well,
let's go.
I know he took a much needed and well-deserved rest and vacay, a little bit of the R&R time.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting anxiously. Now, he did that stream with Franco the other night.
Right.
I guess that's his Ray entree after the vacay. That was a really, really good stream with Franco.
Let me see, because I think he might, I'm not sure if he's got another stream coming up with another person. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that's coming up. But I know probably most likely this Friday his normal secret show is going to happen. And then on Saturday we're going to have our secret show again. So that's back in action. We just took this last week off for like a much needed mental health break after this weekend or last weekend.
I take notes from Uncle Warren. I tell you, he has got some serious skill sets there. He has all the really cool graphics and shit, you know, like the eggs dropping and and then of course the chicken camera thing and the coop.
Yep. I know. I was watching it yesterday morning and apparently there's a rooster in there somewhere. So there's a boy up in that chicken coop. Yeah. Better be careful.
Shout out Uncle Warren. We love you, Uncle.
Yep. Okay, so he is doing another one, but he hasn't announced it yet. Okay. So yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye out. Like I said, you guys keep an eye out for his Twitter page. He usually throws up the whoever is going live at the moment or plans to go live, and it's usually a really good list of people. Also, if anyone
I also wanted to recommend to everyone distant cousin of mine, Jesse Chet, has dropped this album, Deep Pop Culture, and I've been listening to it. It is fire. It's really good. I mean, the Grift and the other things he's done is good. So, I mean, if you're not familiar with Jesse Jett, just check him out and check out that album, Deep Pop Culture. Good stuff.
Yeah,
sorry.
definitely uniquely talented. That guy is crazy, and that song is really good too. I enjoy like the soft undertones of it, and then him singing with it, and then switch into that rap. I'm just like, oh, that's genius. That's so good. So he was really good with that. Also, you guys, if you possibly could, if anybody is watching this, I did a poll last night on Twitter asking if anybody would, or I guess I didn't do a poll, it was just a question. So you could just like it, I guess. If anybody would be interested if we started doing, taking the show What after the show's done, maybe later on that evening, and doing a call-in so that way people can call in and talk and hang out and chat. I spend a lot of time alone in my house other than with my kid. So, just a cool hangout just for people to come and hang out and chill and be able to talk on the phone. I've been checking out call in a little bit more recently and noticing the benefits of it. And, I'm a lonely person and I like to hang out with my friends. So if you guys want
that
to.
sounds like something that would be cool to do. I mean, Wednesdays is always my day off. Every week I always have Wednesdays off. So that would be something cool if you need me to hang out or help out or whatever.
Yeah, you can have multiple hosts and speakers.
Because I feel like, a lot of the shows that I really enjoy used to do call in quite often. And some of them still do it on occasion, others not so much. And so, I'm not going to go through and list all the different creators specifically, but it's just, in terms of engagement with the audience, and really to me, it's kind of a respect to the audience. I feel like when more audience, more interaction with the audience, like in chat. Which I apologize. This may be one of the last appearances of the Yona on the old 1998 desktop. I have a laptop. Well, my wife has a new laptop that I've used to stream that's just an absolute breeze, but it doesn't have a mouse. And I'm not used to the touchy pad thing. I'm just not used to it. Never used it before. Always have clicked the mouse. Always used. I've used this computer for 24 years. So, but my new computer, all the parts are now here. And I'm taking it over to the shop tomorrow to get it all put together, the brand new machine and the second monitor. So upping my game, and at long last, with two computers on at the same time, I can then go over and do my chat. Because normally, I tried doing that before where I could engage with people in the YouTube chat while I'm streaming with my 1998 computer using Windows 7. And it would immediately glitch up, and then like my actual video and my audio would be glitching up because I'm chatting in the YouTube chat.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That'll happen.
But that's what happens when you use 25-year-old computer.
Right.
Problems like that.
Yep. Absolutely. Hey, it happens. That's, that sucks that happens, but that's like technology. It's made to break after a certain amount of time, so you have to go get a new one. So.
Well, yeah, they've engineered obsolescence, and so you can't use that. That's a previous version of Windows. Sorry, and that's why this happened, because all of my engineering and land surveying work is on this machine from 1998 up until I stopped my professional practice in 2008. So, it's 10 years of professional work. Well, then all of a sudden, 2009, 2010, they come out with the latest version of AutoCAD. Now they've moved on to Windows 10. And I go to try to use my stuff, and none of it would work on Windows 10. So I went back to the old machine and dusted it off, because this computer I'm using was actually slated for pasture. It was going to be put out to pasture like a thoroughbred horse after a long racing career. And it sat in my closet for a week. And then I realized I couldn't use any of my old software. And I thought, fuck you, Bill Gates. I'm not going and buying 8 different brand new software updates to all my software just so I can't use any of my software and now have to relearn all 8 new versions of software.
Right.
Fuck them.
Yep.
Seriously. So
that's what they do. That's what they do. But yeah, with Colin, I really like the banter back and forth. I like to be able to hear other people's ideas. I really get tired of the echo chamber that YouTube has become with people that get a platform or a voice that we have to listen to. So it's nice to be able to hear other people's ideas and then maybe even, bring up those ideas on the show later on in the future, giving those people the kind of credit that they deserve for those ideas. So I think a call-in would be really good. I just want to get enough people to at least, say that they want to join. So that way I'm not sitting in, a call-in room by myself for like 3 weeks. So that's the only thing is if I can get enough people that are interested in it, I definitely want to try it out and see how it goes. Because I've been noticing other people's are really, really interesting and awesome and cool. And you could just sit there and have fun and joke while talking about serious subjects as well. So
the only key is you have to have a red button. You have to have a kill switch.
Right. Well, I think so. As the host, everybody stays mute unless you turn them into a speaker, and then they can unmute themselves. So that's kind of nice, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I've only once have I had encounter go bad.
Okay.
Only once.
Okay.
And I ended up having to edit that out of the stream.
Oh. Okay. That's scary.
But I mean, that's 1 out of like 100,
Right.
I mean, it's kind of craps. It's like a Cracker Jack box when you answer that call. You don't really know what you're going to get or what special prize is going to be hidden inside the popcorn. But
Exactly. It happens with all of us, and it happens with a lot of people.
But that's the fun of live. That's the fun of live stream, and that's why you have a red button. I'm like, what? Okay, next caller.
Yes. Exactly. So just if you guys want to check out that tweet and let me know. Keep your eye out for Patrick Lovell's Truth Bombs today. Keep your eye out for Brother Yona's show on Friday. Warren's got his show probably most likely on Friday. Then we'll be there together on Saturday. Warren has who is he no, wait, that might be the Willie Bragg show. Somebody's interviewing the political matrix guy, Marcus Cage. I think it is Warren, because then I'm going to be going on to the political matrix on Sunday as well, possibly the Willie Bragg show too. So we'll see. There's a lot going on this week. You guys just all keep your eye out. Sorry if you guys did not get any of the notification on here. I'm going to see what I did wrong. I don't know. We'll try to figure it out.
I have noticed the last few nights, or the last few Friday nights when I've done my show, I've wanted to go over and catch you and Warren, but with the guests and everything and the conversation going, the shows have always run long. And so it's gotten to where when I finally get done, I've already missed sometimes 10, 15 minutes, sometimes half the show that you guys are doing. And Warren is pretty good about punctuality of like when he starts and when he finishes. And so I'm thinking this Friday night of trying out basically being David Letterman to Warren's Johnny Carson, and like just waiting until his stream is done Friday night, and then going into my like 15-minute pre-show of music videos, and then picking up my show after you guys are done Friday night, because I found that actually I'm going to say close to half, at least half of my audience and regular viewership is in Australia and Asia and like New Zealand and British Columbia, California, Pacific Coast, Hawaii. It's astonishing how many people are regular subscribers and stuff that are in that times, because when I do it late at night Friday night, it's strange. At like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., more people just start pouring in when course, I live in the East Coast, and so East Coast time zone, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. here on my time zone, that really the only people up that late are like gamers and stoners, pretty much. You know,
Right.
which is cool people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I like them. Okay, so Warren said that he's not doing shows on Friday nights anymore. So Friday night is actually all yours.
Oh,
Yeah. Tomorrow night he's going to be interviewing Marcus Cage, and then Saturday we have our secret show, and I think that's it. All right, I'm going to get off of here so that way KRTV
well, I'm going to
has a
start
little
it
bit
at
of.
midnight anyways. We're taking it later.
There you go.
Starting
Let's
it
do
at the
that.
stroke of
Well,
midnight.
that's midnight Eastern, right?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Which
That's
would
only
be
9 for me, so
9 p.m.
that's still
Well,
early
see,
enough
there
for
you
my
go.
old
If you're
ass to
not
go to
doing a
bed at
show
a
with
decent hour.
Warren Friday night, maybe you can hop a show for a few minutes. But
Oh, there you go.
I don't know. I'm starting
I'm
at
down.
midnight, 9 p.m. Pacific, and I'm probably not going to go much more than about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay.
Mainly just going
I'm
to talk
down.
about the Brazil thing, and then roll out the. It's mainly going to be the music, because
Okay.
now I have a laptop. Well, my wife has a laptop, brand new laptop, and with that, I streamed music videos perfectly. Everything worked great. It made a difference with a 25-hour-old computer versus a 25-year-old computer.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, before I just got this new laptop about 6 months ago, and before, just to render, let's say, an hour-long video was taking 7 hours to render. But now with this new laptop, an hour-long video I can render in less than 5 minutes. And I'm like, this is
Yeah.
real? This is real life? Does this really happen to people in real life? Like, I don't have to wait 7 hours? Are you
Yeah,
kidding
I
me?
did that with the song yesterday. Like normally, whenever I take a long song, like when I say long, any song that's over 6 minutes long is a long song. Most songs are under 6 minutes. And in fact, radio songs are under 5 minutes. But when I go to mash it up with other songs, I have to first repitch it, right, to make sure that they're both playing in the same key.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Otherwise, it'll be off, right? If it's so, first I repitch to get them all lined up, but then rhythmically, they may have a different tempo, beats per minute, right?
Right.
So then I have to stretch or shrink one of the music tracks in order for it to line up on the same beats as the other track, right? Now, normally when I go to do that on my Audacity here, if I'm retiming a 6-minute song, it could take 40 minutes. I went to do that on that laptop last night. It was done in 10 seconds. Oh my God.
I know. It's amazing. It's so amazing.
I'm like, whoa, it's already done? No fucking way. I clicked and listened to it. Son of a bitch, I'm living in the future.
That's right. That's how I felt too. I know. Just wait though. Now you got a faster computer. A lot more people are going to be asking you to do things. Because they're going to be like, oh, you can do that in 5 minutes? Oh, I need you to do this 2-hour video. Can you please? You're like, oh, fuck. Damn it. No, it's broken.
It's great.
I don't know
Now
what
I'll be able to
happened.
make even more music. Oh, God.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
I always have so much fun hanging out with you, sis. So much
You
fun.
too. You too. Me too. I enjoy your presence and you being around. I love that you're in my life. So thank you. And thank you to everybody here who came today. You guys are all awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed the interesting and very informative conversation we had today. Lots of different things, but a lot of things tying in together, you know, answering to the next thing. So today was very informative, and I'm glad that you were able to like stay along with me and keep up with me. You're amazingly talented and super intellectual and very smart. So I
Because
love
the
you to death.
repeating trend is recolonization. It's
Exactly.
all about recolonization. And
Yep.
the cherry on top is France and the United States pot calling the kettle black with Russia. That's just rich as the whipped cream and the cherry on top.
Exactly. All right, so everybody keep an eye out for what we said, and I will see you guys again tomorrow. Have a good night, and peace out, everybody. Thanks.